You're nobody. That's what she said. On my birthday. In my kitchen. Holding the gift I paid for. In a house I refinanced so her mother could quit her job and find herself. Rachel, my stepdaughter, didn't even blink when she said it. 16, smug, wearing a sweatshirt from some Ivy League she hadn't even applied to yet. Behind her, my wife Melanie smirked like she was watching a sitcom rerun. Same look she used to give me when I forgot to take the trash out. Except now it carried something colder. Meaner. You were always just temporary, Melanie added, reaching for the orange juice like she'd just ordered an appetizer. Brian builds companies. Brian. The name dropped like a wine stain on white carpet. I didn't need the last name. I'd seen the late-night texts. The sudden interest in consulting retreats. The way she started going to the gym in lipstick. I'd even seen the laptop left open. FaceTime paused mid-grin on a man who looked like he moisturized with arrogance and crypto. But I never said a word. Not even when I saw her turn our bedroom into her walk-in closet. Not even when Rachel stopped calling me David and started calling me him. Because I was playing a different game. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. So when Melanie handed me a card, no gift, just a grocery store birthday card signed with her initials, I didn't react. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I poured my coffee, sat at the table in front of my untouched German chocolate cake, and listened to them discuss Brian like I'd already passed away. Then I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a thick envelope, cream-colored, sealed in red wax, not for drama, but because I knew it would make her hesitate. I placed it next to my plate. Melanie stopped mid-sentence. Rachel looked at it like it was ticking. I stood. Thank you for breakfast, I said. That's all. No raised voice. No bitter sarcasm. Just a calm, almost polite farewell. And I walked out. Not just out of the kitchen. Out of the house. Out of the charade. Out of the skin I'd worn for too damn long pretending their approval meant anything. As I shut the front door behind me, I didn't look back. Didn't need to. I could already feel the shift. The discomfort. The questions they wouldn't ask until too late. I drove away without checking the mirror. By sunset, my phone was deactivated. By nightfall, my bank accounts were rerouted. By the time Melanie texted, "Where are you?" I'd already closed the account the message was sent to. You don't scream at people like that. You don't fight. You just leave the table they thought they had set for you. Because when someone tells you you're a nobody, the real power comes when you show them how quiet somebody can be. 3 hours after I walked out, I was off the grid. Not in the melodramatic, living in a cabin, eating beans from a kin kind of way. No, this was strategic deletion. I'd been preparing for months. Mail rerouted to a private box 2 states over. A new LLC filed in a name no one had heard in decades. Mine before the first marriage. My lawyer, Wallace, had every document pre-signed and filed under quiet trigger conditions. As far as the system was concerned, David Monroe had folded. Gone. Not a missing person. Just someone who'd finally gotten tired of playing the family idiot. Melanie texted. Called. Then nothing. She assumed I was spiraling. Heartbroken. Maybe holed up in some motel with a bottle of regret. Good. Because while she went back to breakfast smoothies and Brian's protein shake grin, I was doing something far more interesting. I was reappearing. Not in her life. In his. The mistake Brian made, his fatal one, was assuming I had no value. That I was just some gray-haired tax write-off with a thinning hairline and a vinyl record collection. He never once asked what I did before I became Stepdad David. See, once upon a time, before Melanie, before Rachel, before real estate brochures and marriage therapy, and can we talk about your communication style? I'd been someone. I'd been early in tech. Not the flashy kind, the infrastructure kind. The wiring. The sweat work. The foundation people forget exists once the glass walls and IPO buzzwords go up. Back then, I helped seed capital for companies most people now couldn't imagine life without. And one of those people I helped, Richard Kellman, better known now as the silent co-founder of Vector One. The same Vector One that Brian now claimed to be building from scratch. 1 week after I left, Melanie's co-worker, Joanne, the one who always brought bland chicken salad and overshared during HR Zoom calls, asked the question that started the unraveling. Wasn't your husband on the advisory board for Vector 1? Melanie blinked. No, that's Brian's company. Joanne tilted her head. No, I mean your ex-husband. David. His name's in the new board filings. They sent the update last night. Melanie excused herself mid-meeting and speed-walked to her office. She searched. There it was. Board of Advisors, Vector 1 Holdings. David Monroe. A new entry. Fresh ink. But worse, there was a file attached to the SEC update. A PDF, dry and technical, but with 3 words that hit like a migraine. Non-executive strategic counsel. It meant I wasn't just a passive name. It meant I had influence. She stared at the screen. Tried to remember the last time I mentioned tech. When she'd last asked what I did before she made me her husband prop for family holiday cards. She hadn't. Because in her world, I'd been decorative. Now, I was structural. Brian would find out soon enough, when his funding request hit a compliance snag. When Richard forwarded him a memo with my notes in the margins. When the man he thought he'd replaced with charm and a Tesla suddenly held the keys to the back end of his empire. Melanie didn't text me again after that, but I know what she did next. She opened the envelope. Too late. Brian was in his element. Standing in front of a half-circle of VCs in designer sneakers and Patagonia vests, he clicked through his slides like a TED Talk runner-up with a trust fund complex. Terms like frictionless scaling, cross-platform synergy, and AI-enhanced verticals rolled off his tongue like buzzword confetti. Smug didn't cover it. The man thought he was rewriting Silicon Valley from a WeWork lounge. Until he walked in. No fanfare. No greeting. Just a slow creak of the conference room door and the arrival of someone who didn't belong, but clearly outranked everyone in the room. Older. Heavy set. Silver tie clip. Sharp eyes that scanned the room like he'd already read every LinkedIn bio at the table and found them all laughable. He didn't sit. Didn't shake hands. He just looked directly at Brian and said, calmly, "Founding rights are murky. You'll want to clean that up before Series B. Otherwise the cap table won't hold." The room went dead quiet. Brian stammered something about NDAs and early-stage fluidity, but the man ignored him completely. Turned to one of the junior partners and asked, "Has your firm done diligence on the 2014 debt instruments that seeded their early infrastructure?" The partner blinked. I don't think." "You should," the man interrupted. "There's a clause in the fallback agreement that makes this entire pitch legally ambitious." He left before Brian could form a full sentence. By the time Brian got back to their condo that evening, the smirk was gone. No Tesla charging Instagram posts. No passive flexes about VC brunches. Just quiet. And tension. Melanie was on the couch, trying to pretend she hadn't spent the last hour Googling everything she could about Delaware corporate law. She looked up as he entered. Brian didn't say hello. He dropped his bag, loosened his tie. Then, like a man who had just realized he wasn't the apex predator in the room, he asked, "Who's Richard K?" She froze. The air shifted. Not what, who? Richard Kellman. That name had been sealed away, like a box labeled before me. Melanie's mouth opened, but her voice didn't follow. Because Richard Kellman wasn't just a name from David's past. He was her late husband's best friend. The one who cried at the funeral. The one who stopped visiting after she remarried too quickly. The one who vanished quietly when David entered the picture and apparently never truly left. Worse, he was loyal. David once told her that Richard was the kind of man who never forgot a debt. That when David saved Richard's company during the 2008 crash by cashing out his own 401k, Richard swore he'd return the favor in silence and with scale. She thought it was just one of those masculine friendship things men say when they drink too much. Apparently, it wasn't. Brian sat down across from her, leaned forward, and lowered his voice. "Your ex-husband just brought a knife to a gunfight, and he's the only one who knew where all the bullets were buried." She didn't respond, because deep down, she knew it wasn't a gunfight anymore. It was an execution, and David wasn't done. David didn't go off the grid. He went back to the roots. While Melanie imagined him pacing motel carpets and scribbling in tear-soaked journals, he was actually drinking single malt on a porch in northern Vermont, overlooking a lake Richard Kellman now called home. Not the kind of lake you find on travel blogs. This one was private, quiet, no cell towers, No influencers. Just strategy, stories, and silence between two men who understood what the long game actually meant. David wasn't hiding. He was rebuilding, consulting, advising, drawing out war plans over bourbon with a man who'd once slept in his guest room during the worst year of his life. "I told you I'd pay it back," Richard muttered one night, staring into the flames of the stone hearth. "You're doing more than that," David replied. "You're helping me remind them I was never temporary. I was waiting." Meanwhile, back in their high-rise apartment, Melanie was discovering just how much could unravel when the person you dismiss starts pulling threads. Rachel, her darling daughter, future Columbia undergrad, Brian's biggest fan, screamed from her room when her iPad refused to connect to their shared family cloud. "It's not showing my music. Why is Dad's old Spotify even on this thing?" she yelled. Melanie brushed it off until her own phone froze mid-purchase at Whole Foods. "Declined. Twice. Try another card," the cashier mumbled, already reaching for the next customer. She did. Declined again. When she got home, there was a fraud alert email in her inbox from the bank, but the flagged charge wasn't from Nigeria or Vietnam. It was a dinner receipt from the same Vermont town Richard had vanished to. 3 guests. No details. Just a handwritten tip line signed, "Appreciate your loyalty." That wasn't the only oddity. Brian, already rattled from the pitch meeting debacle, logged into the Vector One backend to check on the latest IP filings, standard patent tracking for an upcoming product line they were planning to license out. But something was wrong. His name was gone. From everything. Design credits. Algorithmic contributions. Even the original submission metadata gone. Like he'd never touched the damn thing. Instead, the patents were now associated with a new entity, DMK Consulting. Small font. Registered in Delaware. And the listed contacts? David Monroe. Richard Kellman. Brian exploded. "This has to be a clerical error," he shouted, slamming his laptop shut. But he knew better. Everyone in this world knows IP changes don't happen by accident. They happen in boardrooms. In silence. With signatures made months ago. Melanie stood there watching him unravel, unable to speak. Because deep down, she knew what was happening. David hadn't disappeared. He positioned. And the worst part? He wasn't gloating. He wasn't even visible. He was operating like a ghost with a scalpel, making incisions so precise they wouldn't even feel the cuts until they'd already started bleeding out. The subject line was deceptively plain. Notice of filed agreement. Separation of joint marital assets. Monroe versus Monroe. Melanie almost deleted it, assuming it was another lawyer fishing for clients. Then she saw the sender. A boutique firm from Boston. One David had mentioned once, years ago, back when they still shared dreams over diner pancakes and not cold stares across the kitchen island. She opened it. Read the first line. Then read it again. David had filed for asset separation. 3 months ago. It was backdated. Legally binding. Signed. Notarized. Quietly, officially, and completely without her knowledge. There was a note from the attorney included. As per the conditions agreed upon during preliminary arbitration, your awareness is considered established by receipt of the sealed envelope delivered on her birthday. Her hands trembled. That envelope. The one she laughed at. The one she left on the kitchen table under a coupon flyer and later used as a coaster for a mimosa. She never opened it. Thought it was dramatic flair. A symbolic gesture from a man she assumed was too passive to ever really walk away. It wasn't symbolic. It was a bomb with a delayed fuse. Brian walked in mid-panic, still trying to get through to Vector One's CTO, who wasn't answering calls. He noticed her expression immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, dropping his laptop bag on the floor. She didn't speak, just turned the screen toward him. He scrolled. Paused. His eyes narrowed. "This references our shared equity," he muttered. "Why is he? Oh, come on." No. This clause links our joint holdings in the household trust to board influence? What the hell, eh? She finally found her voice. "What does that mean, Brian?" "It means," he said, voice low and tight, "that he didn't just file for separation. He did it in a way that attached your assets to my future shares. He looped your half of the household trust into his legal leverage. And since you used the trust to partially co-invest in Vector One, your name is tied to my equity pool." He looked up at her like she'd just handed a live grenade to their enemy. "You married a man who knew what leverage meant." Melanie blinked. She had spent years thinking David was a placeholder, a polite, outdated piece of furniture that collected dust in the corner of her life while she renovated her future with a startup cowboy who quoted Steve Jobs and wore designer hoodies. But now, David wasn't just reclaiming dignity. He was unweaving them, thread by thread, not with a meltdown, not with lawyers and alimony threats, but with fine print and filings so methodically planted, even their accountants hadn't noticed. Brian stood up and grabbed his phone. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To beg for my own company back," he muttered, dialing furiously. Melanie sat there alone, staring at the blinking cursor in the email reply box. Her name, Melanie Monroe, still stared back from the header. For the first time since the kitchen that morning, the words hit her differently. Monroe, not a name she wore, a name she borrowed. And the man she borrowed it from just turned it into a weapon. The restaurant was one of those places where the valet doesn't ask your name, he already knows it. Soft jazz, custom menus, centerpieces so tall they could have had zip codes. Everyone at the table had money, or the sin of it trailing close behind. Champagne flutes sparkled like they were trying to eavesdrop. David sat at the far end. Relaxed. Crisp suit. No tie. The kind of confidence that doesn't need volume. To his right was Richard Kelman. Across the table, fund managers, legacy investors, one ex-senator turned angel. It wasn't just dinner. It was a message. The place cards were printed on heavyweight cardstock. No mistakes. So when Brian walked in, 3 minutes late and noticeably out of breath, there was no seat for him. No introduction. No chair pulled out. He lingered, standing, like someone who crashed a funeral thinking it was a networking event. David didn't flinch. Just sipped his wine and carried on, listening to Richard recount the story of Vector One's early infrastructure challenges, leaving out Brian entirely, naturally. Names were named, but not his. Brian finally cleared his throat. I wasn't aware this dinner was happening tonight." Richard didn't look up. David did. He didn't sneer. Didn't smirk. He simply raised his glass and said, calmly, deliberately, "To history and those who respect it." A beat. Then, applause. Not thunderous. Not mocking. Worse. Polite. Affirming. The kind of applause that says, "You're not needed here." Brian stood frozen, unsure whether to fake a laugh or fake a phone call. In the end, he just left. Quickly. No goodbyes. A ghost retreating into his own irrelevance. The waiter quietly removed the empty plate that had been set as a contingency. No one asked about him again. That night, Melanie was sitting on the couch when her phone buzzed. "Brian. He locked me out of my own date room. All access revoked. Legal didn't even see it coming. What the hell did he file?" She didn't answer. Didn't even open the full thread. Just turned the phone face down and let the silence breathe. Because she understood now. David didn't bluff. He didn't threaten. He simply waited for the moment everyone assumed he was done, and then reminded them. He wasn't loud, he was accurate. And now? He was visible, not as the husband they discarded, but as the man they should have never underestimated. It started with a text from her sister. Just 5 words. I ran into David. Radiant. Not better. Not doing okay. Radiant. As if the man she'd mocked into oblivion had emerged from the ashes moisturized, centered, and somehow 6 pounds lighter. Melanie stared at the screen, unsure whether to be annoyed or afraid. 2 days later, her brother called. The same brother who once joked that David's personality was like dry toast. The one who never invited him to poker night, even when they were married. Now his tone was clipped, accusatory. I saw the fundraiser live stream, he said. You were cruel. Why wouldn't he retaliate? She blinked. What fundraiser? He scoffed. Jesus, Melanie. The one for Veterans Healthcare. Sponsored by Kelman Group. David gave the closing speech. He crushed it. Talked about integrity, about rebuilding your identity when people take it from you. He had the whole room standing. And did you know he donated his entire advisory retainer to launch a recovery program for laid-off engineers over 50? Yeah, you didn't know. That's the problem. He hung up. Then came the worst moment yet. Rachel, her daughter, the one who used to roll her eyes at David, who once said he smelled like old furniture and mocked him for still using a landline. She stood in the doorway to Melanie's room, holding her phone, a screenshot pulled up. It was from Twitter. A freeze frame of David at the fundraiser, arms around two war vets, smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in years. "Why'd you laugh at him?" Rachel asked quietly. Melanie turned from the mirror. "What? That morning. On his birthday. You laughed. You and Brian. Like he was a joke." Melanie inhaled slowly. "Sweetheart, I didn't mean." "But you did." Rachel's voice didn't rise. "You laughed. I did too. And I didn't even know why. Just followed your lead. But now everyone's saying he's incredible. Even my English teacher posted his speech. She called it essential viewing for anyone who's ever been underestimated." Melanie's throat closed. The walls of her curated world, the brunch circle, the condo board, the corporate ladies' night group chats, were cracking. Not loudly, quietly, subtly. No one said it outright. But she noticed. Fewer replies, fewer tags, fewer smiles, and more reposts of David's speech. More LinkedIn mentions. More "so proud to know him" comments under the video of him shaking hands with Kelman, surrounded by veterans, engineers, board members, people who mattered. She tried defending herself to her sister. "He abandoned us. You laughed at him. He blindsided me legally. He rebuilt something without you." She tried calling Brian, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She tried messaging Rachel later that night. No reply. Just silence. Not the David kind, strategic, cold, calculated. This silence was different. It was earned, and it was spreading. She found out the same way the rest of the world did, through a push notification. Breaking. Vector One acquired in quiet buyout. $190M valuation rumored. Melanie blinked at her screen. Thought it was a mistake. Maybe some other company. Some other Vector. But the sub-headline removed all doubt. Deal led by private holding group based in Vermont. Names linked to Richard Kelman and David Monroe. Her ears rang. She opened the article. Skimmed past the gushing words about the company's promise, its clean infrastructure, its remarkable leadership transition. The comments speculating whether it was a precursor to something bigger, a roll-up, maybe even a pre-IPO maneuver. But one line stopped her cold. Brian R. Caldwell's equity appears to have been diluted during late-stage negotiations. Unconfirmed reports suggest a clause was activated that reclassified his contributions as non-founding. Non-founding. The man who had once introduced himself as CEO of Tomorrow at every dinner party was now being legally referred to as a former contributor. She switched apps. Typed frantically into LinkedIn. Brian's profile, untouched. Still read. Founder and CEO, Vector One. But his last update was 2 weeks old. No post. No celebration. No bragging. Nothing. Then, almost like a synchronized strike, her own inbox pinged. A short email. No greeting. No sign-off. Subject, correction request, profile inaccuracy. Dear Melanie, as part of the brand streamlining following the recent acquisition, we kindly request you update your LinkedIn biography to remove the line co-founder's wife, Vector One. This phrase does not reflect a formal role, nor is it appropriate in professional designation. Thank you for your cooperation. She stared at it. No rage. Just paralysis. All those brunches, the panels, the networking events where she'd introduced herself with that line, "Brian's the brain, I'm the brand," and now she was being asked to scrub it like a wine stain from a white dress. She scrolled down, clicked open her own LinkedIn. It still said it. Bold. Right there in the bio she'd agonized over during spin class. Co-founder's wife, brand strategist, building futures with vision. Now, it just looked pathetic. She hovered over the edit button, paused, scrolled up, clicked on David's name. He had posted something that morning. A quote, paired with a photo of him and Richard in front of the lake, sleeves rolled, laughing like men who already knew what the end of the game looked like. The quote, "Revenge is for amateurs. Precision is permanent. No hashtags. No links. No flex. Just a sentence. And 8,400 likes." She switched back to her profile and stared at the cursor blinking beside the title she used to think meant something. Co-founder's wife. No? She couldn't even remember what exactly she had co-founded. The man she'd mocked into silence hadn't just won. He'd rewritten the story so she wasn't even in it. It was a plain package. No sender, no return address, just her name written in tight, meticulous lettering. The kind you'd expect on legal forms, not on cardboard boxes. Melanie opened it in the kitchen with a steak knife, expecting maybe a courier mistake or one of those weird apology baskets from a PR firm trying to get ahead of bad press. It wasn't a basket. It wasn't even padded. Just a single photo. Matte finish. Heavy stock. No frame. It showed a log cabin nestled in the curve of a mountain valley. There was snow on the edges of the roof, sunlight slicing through the trees behind it. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the three people in the foreground. David, of course. Standing relaxed, hair tousled by the wind, wearing a thermal Henley that made him look 10 years younger. A coffee mug in hand. Smiling. Next to him, Richard Kelman, grinning in mid-conversation, sleeves rolled up, clipboard under his arm. And then her. At first, Melanie's brain didn't register it. Too much disbelief. But the posture. The eyebrows. The way she stood slightly sideways like she was trying to look taller, she'd seen it 1,000 times. At school plays. In dressing room mirrors. Rachel. Her daughter. Her daughter. Standing beside David, laughing with him. Holding a drill in one hand, a tablet in the other. Hair tied back. Wearing a hoodie with a logo she didn't recognize until she squinted and saw the tiny lettering, DMK Systems. Not Vector. Not Brian's world. David's. They weren't just posing. They were working. And on the back of the photo, in David's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words. She knows what real legacy looks like. Melanie sat down. Hard. The chair scraped against the tile. She read the sentence again. Legacy. The word she used to throw around at dinner parties when Brian was pitching investors in their living room. The word she used to justify turning David into an afterthought. A placeholder. The man you settle for before the actual story begins. But David had rewritten the ending. Not just for himself. For Rachel. Her daughter, who used to call him nobody. Who once giggled behind his back during family therapy. Who wore Brian's startup hoodie like it was a badge of coolness. She had switched teams. Not out of rebellion. Not out of pity. But because legacy wasn't about brand decks and LinkedIn bios. It was about standing next to someone who showed up, even when you spit in his face. And David? He showed up. Every Sunday morning, helping with homework. Every flu season, holding her hair when she puked. Every school dance, waiting in the car with snacks and tissues. She just didn't see it. Not then. Now it was too late. Melanie sat there, the photo trembling in her hands, wondering how many times she'd said David's name like it meant nothing, and how many more times she'd have to say it now, knowing it meant everything. There were no threats. No lawsuits. No dramatic scenes. Just a photo. And a sentence. And the unmistakable, suffocating feeling that she'd lost something far more permanent than a man. She'd lost the one witness to her cruelty, and the one person who had quietly forgiven her daughter for it. She didn't pack a bag. Didn't grab a coat. Didn't even lock the condo. She just drove. Phone on silent. Radio off. Windows cracked to let the cold sting her awake. Her nails dug into the steering wheel like it could somehow steer her toward a version of reality where this wasn't happening, where she hadn't lost everything, and to him of all people. The road twisted through black pines and frost-slicked turns, each mile louder than the last. Not because of noise. Because of silence. Because for the first time in her life, Melanie had nowhere to hide behind. No smirks. No status. No curated filters or perfect bios. Just guilt. Raw and unfiltered. By the time she reached the cabin, it was near 2 a.m. The gravel under her tires cracked like bones. A faint amber glow spilled from the windows. He was awake. Of course he was. David had always been the type who couldn't sleep when something was unfinished. She stepped out. Bare arms. No plan. Just motion. Marched up to the door and knocked. Hard. Then again. And again. David, she croaked. Please. No answer. Then the knob turned. The door creaked open. And there he was. Older, yes, but not tired. Not broken. Just calm. The kind of calm that made your lungs forget how to work. He didn't say a word. Didn't invite her in. Just looked at her with the same expression he wore that morning in the kitchen, only now, it wasn't masked pain. It was peace. I know I screwed up, she whispered, the words rushing out like water through a cracked dam. I laughed. I followed Brian. I was awful to you, I know. But Rachel forgives you. She sees you now. That has to count for something. Please, I just want to understand. I want to know why you. 10 minutes. She talked for 10 full minutes. Tears. Regret. Apologies. Promises. David let her say it all. Didn't interrupt. Just listened, as if each word was a note in a song he already knew the lyrics to. Then he turned, walked to a shelf, pulled something down, and placed it in her hands. The envelope. The exact same one. Cream paper. Red wax. Still sealed. You never opened it, he said. Her breath caught. With shaking fingers, she cracked the seal, peeled back the flap. Inside, a single sheet. No documents. No threats. Just a sentence, handwritten in a steady, slanted print. This is the last time you'll ever underestimate me. No signature. No punctuation. Just the full weight of everything she thought he wasn't, now staring her in the face. She looked up, but the door was already closing. Not slammed. Just closing. Softly. Deliberately. Final. And this time, she didn't knock again. Monica came home from her yoga and smoothie wellness retreat, smelling like lavender and someone else's cologne. That was the first thing. The second? She hugged their son, but not him. Not even a pat. Just a dry, hey, tossed over her shoulder as she dumped her weekender bag in the laundry room and opened the fridge like she lived alone. Eric stood there, stupidly holding a bottle of wine he'd bought to welcome her back. Her favorite, which she now claimed tasted too acidic. That night, she went to bed early, claimed she was emotionally detoxing and needed solitude. He slept on his side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, the smell of incense still hanging in the air like a curse. Over the next few weeks, the changes stacked up like unpaid bills. She stopped initiating anything, no kisses, no touches, no casual brushes against him in the hallway. When he reached for her, she flinched, then covered it with a forced smile. Just tired, she said. Hormonal. He knew better. Monica was a lot of things, but subtle wasn't one of them. When she was annoyed, you'd hear about it. When she was horny, you'd definitely hear about it. But now? She moved through the house like a ghost who barely acknowledged his existence. One night, after dinner, silent, rushed, no eye contact, he sat across from her at the table, watching her scroll through her phone. Face down. Every time she set it down, he finally spoke. Is there someone else? She didn't even look up. Just exhaled. Eric. Jesus. You're being paranoid. This is your job stress talking. He wasn't working more than usual. You're imagining things. No, I'm noticing things. Monica finally looked at him. Cold. Her jaw set like she was about to scold a child. You're pushing me away with this crap. If you want to wreck our marriage with insecurity, keep going. She stood up, plate untouched. I'm going to bed. Maybe sleep will give you some clarity. He sat alone, mouth dry, fingers clenched. His mind screaming, but his face calm. For now. Then came the bomb. 2 months later, in the middle of folding laundry, Monica dropped it like she was talking about a weather forecast. I'm pregnant. Eric was holding one of her tank tops. He froze mid-fold. You, what? She smiled. That fake kind of serene smile she'd picked up from some self-help podcast. I'm pregnant. It's early, but, yeah. And then, like she was doing him a favor, I really need you to trust me right now. Trust. Eric sat down on the edge of the bed. Vasectomy. 5 years ago. No reversals. No failures. He remembered the urologist's exact words. Your swimmers are retired for good. He blinked slowly, like maybe this was a dream. Like maybe she was joking. She wasn't. She walked over, kissed his forehead like he was the one who needed comfort, and said, I know this is a surprise, but don't ruin it by overthinking. Let's just be grateful. He nodded. Grateful. He kissed her cheek, gently, slowly, the way you say goodbye without saying it. Then he said he needed to get some air. A drive. Maybe a weekend to think. Monica didn't even look suspicious. She smiled again, almost smug. Take whatever time you need. He walked out the front door. Calm. Controlled. But inside? Inside, something was burning slow, hot, and irreversible. Eric roasted salmon that night, the way Monica used to like it, with lemon zest, dill, and that overpriced olive oil she claimed helped her hormonal balance. He even uncorked a second bottle of that acidic red she once hated and lit a candle like it was some goddamn date night. She played along, of course, smiling, twirling pasta like they were newlyweds again. For a moment, she even laughed when the cat knocked over her water glass. It was the first time in months she didn't look like she was silently auditioning for a new life somewhere else. And Eric? He nodded, smiled, played his part, even toasted her, glass raised, to surprises. She tilted her head, a soft, rehearsed giggle. To trust, she said. He clinked glasses and swallowed hard. After dinner, she turned on one of those mind-numbing dating shows and curled under a blanket, humming some generic pop song. She looked so at peace it made his skin crawl. He excused himself early, said the wine made him sleepy. She didn't bat an eye, just waved a hand and kept scrolling through her phone. Eric closed the door to the guest room slowly, soundlessly, as if locking himself into a vault. No lights on, just the glow of his laptop. The email was already drafted. Subject line: Urgent family matter, confidential. The lawyer was someone he hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade, but had met through a colleague when drafting his will. A woman named Cassandra Banks. Discreet, efficient, ruthless in silk blouses. He reread every word before hitting send. Attached were 2 documents, a scanned copy of his vasectomy procedure and the sterilization confirmation results. Dated. Signed. Undeniable. He sat still for a few seconds, listening. Monica's laugh from the living room echoed faintly. God, she was relaxed. It almost made him admire the level of delusion she must have spun around herself. He picked up his phone, opened his texts, found the last message he ever sent to Drew. Happy New Year, brother. Stay out of trouble. That was 2 years ago. He typed slowly now, each word feeling like the edge of a knife being sharpened. I need you to find out who the real father is. No one can know yet, not even her. Then, as if anticipating the inevitable, he added, use burner phones only. This gets dirty. I don't want it traced. He stared at the screen, then hit send. The message went out, and so did the last bit of the old Eric, the version that still believed in explanations and apologies. In some twisted redemption arc where Monica would cry and say she was sorry. No. Now, it was different. Now it was war. He opened a drawer and pulled out the small, metal lockbox he kept from his army days. Inside, old IDs, spare SIM cards, and a flash drive labeled only with a red dot. He hadn't touched it in years. Tonight, it would come back to life. From the hallway, he heard Monica sigh and turn off the TV. Then her footsteps, soft and slow, padded past his door. She didn't knock, didn't ask why he was sleeping elsewhere. Because in her mind, she had him exactly where she wanted him. Eric waited until the house was completely silent, then opened his laptop again and typed one more sentence into a blank document. If she wanted a game, she just chose the wrong opponent. Drew didn't waste time. Within 48 hours of Eric's text, he was in town, black SUV, duffel bag, burner phone, and that look on his face Eric remembered from the one time Drew had taken down a cartel accountant without firing a shot. Quiet competence. No flair. Just results. They met at a diner 2 towns over. No names. No small talk. Just a manila folder slid across the greasy table. Her phone's tied to 2 messaging apps she deleted last month, Drew said, stirring sugar into coffee like it was war protocol. But her backups weren't encrypted. Sloppy. Eric flipped through the first pages. Time-stamped logs of Monica's calls. One number in particular came up nearly every day, always under private or blocked. She's using a secondary line, Drew added. Probably a VoIP routed through a secure browser. I'm tracing it. And GPS? Eric asked, though he already knew. Drew nodded. Wiped every Sunday night like clockwork. But your family plan keeps cloud backups by default. He dropped a second folder. Maps. Timestamps. A pattern. Tuesdays. Thursdays. 2-hour gaps in the afternoon labeled as errands. But her car was parked outside a brick-faced apartment building in a neighborhood Monica once called too sketchy for yoga moms. Eric didn't flinch. He closed the folder and signaled the waitress for the check. Next stop was the clinic. Private. Off-book. The kind of place that didn't ask questions as long as the cash cleared and the initials on the forms didn't match the ID. Eric gave blood, cheek swabs, and a sample in a sterile white room that smelled like fresh bleach and finality. The nurse never made eye contact. She didn't need to. Do you want the results sent to your house? She asked. No, Eric said. Burn this paper after you write the email address. He scribbled an alias account Drew set up that morning. Then he walked out into the cold air, into a version of himself he didn't quite recognize, but didn't fear anymore. Back home, Monica was lighting candles again. Citrus lavender, like always. She asked if he wanted tea. "You've been quiet lately," she added with mock concern. He just smiled and said, "I'm trying to be more mindful." She smiled back. Thought she won again. That night, after she went to bed, he moved to phase 2. The finances. They had 3 joint accounts, checking, savings, and what Monica liked to call their freedom fund. He called it something else now, collateral. One by one, Eric initiated transfers to a new trust under his name alone. He left just enough behind to avoid suspicion. A few dozen grocery transactions, a couple subscription payments. The illusion of activity. Then he changed the beneficiaries on his life insurance. Monica used to be the sole recipient. Now, the new documents listed no designated beneficiary. Let the vultures squabble later. He even called HR the next morning and had his pay rerouted to a separate account entirely. Just simplifying things for tax season, he told the rep. All lies. All necessary. Drew texted later that day, "Got a name. Working on facial confirmation. Sit tight." Eric replied with just 3 words. No mercy. Ever. He stood in front of the mirror that evening, watching his own face, older than he remembered, sharper now. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was reconstruction. Brick by brick, he was rebuilding himself. Without her. Without illusions. Just one goal. Bury the lie. And the liar who built it. The name came in at 2:43 a.m., blinking on Eric's phone like a bullet through silence. Drew. Confirmed. Stephen Wexler. You were right not to believe the yoga crap. Eric sat up in the dark, heart thudding, but not from surprise. From recognition. Stephen Wexler. The man Monica used to spit venom about during dinner parties. Back when she still invited friends over. The name had once come up because he tried to hug her at a holiday work event. He's a creep, she said, swirling a wine glass. A full-body shutter creep. Another time, she'd rolled her eyes at one of his social media rants and said, Stephen Wexler lies like he breathes. I wouldn't trust him with a stapler. Apparently, now she trusted him with 2-hour dinners and unexplained Tuesdays. Drew sent the first batch of photos that morning. Eric studied them like autopsy reports. Monica sitting across from Stephen at a tapas bar she once claimed gave her food poisoning. Monica in oversized sunglasses laughing at something on his phone. Monica touching his arm across the table. Intimate. Familiar. Not just affair territory, long-term territory. The same black dress she wore to his birthday last year. For dinners. 2 weeks. Same routine. No public affection, but always the same car parked out back. And always the same exit. Monica leaving 5 minutes later, like she thought that would throw off suspicion. Amateur hour. Eric scrolled through the images again, slower this time. Looking not for the betrayal, he'd already swallowed that. But the smirk she wore when she thought no one was watching. God, it was smug. She looked free. Drew called that afternoon. You up for a coffee with the devil? What do you mean? I know Wexler. I saved his ass back in Jakarta. Got him out of a real mess with some people who don't use subpoenas. He owes me. And trust me, he remembers. Eric was silent. I already contacted him, Drew continued. Told him you're a concerned husband. Left out the baby part. He thinks Monica's some girl you're dating. Wants to meet. Says he'll bring receipts. What kind of receipts? Screenshots. Messages. Possibly more. He says she told him you split years ago. Thinks you're just the ex. She's been playing house with him like she's some tragic single mom. Eric let out a breath that tasted like rust. Set it up. They met 2 days later in a mid-tier hotel lobby that reeked of desperation and cinnamon air freshener. Wexler showed up wearing a blazer over a graphic tee, hair slicked back, the same exact brand of fake charm Monica used to mock. He recognized Drew, didn't recognize Eric. Perfect. Dude, I didn't know she was married, Wexler said immediately, holding up both hands. She told me her husband bailed after some midlife crisis. Moved to Costa Rica with a barista named Junie. I mean, Jesus, Junie? Sounds fake, right? Eric didn't speak. Just stared. Wexler pulled out his phone and scrolled fast. Look, I didn't press. She was hot. Seemed lonely. What do you want from me? But yeah, we hooked up. A few times. Nothing serious. She said she didn't want labels while the divorce stuff settled. Whatever that means. Then the kicker. She kept saying she wanted a baby, that it was her time. Said she was tired of waiting for the right man. Eric tilted his head. And you agreed? I mean, I didn't exactly say no. Drew cut in, voice cool. You're willing to put that in writing? Wexler blinked. What? Like an affidavit? Exactly like that. He laughed. Drew, you think I care about her that much? Man, I'll sign a damn mural if it gets me clear of this mess. They left the hotel with hard copies of texts, a dated receipt from a pharmacy that sold ovulation kits, and a half-drunk man's signature on a statement saying Monica told him she was single and ready to start a family. Eric didn't smile. Not even a twitch. But when he got in the car, he checked his watch and said, 3 weeks until the hearing, right? Drew nodded. Give or take. Eric looked out the window at the falling leaves. Good, he said. Let her keep planning her future. She has no idea what's walking toward her. Eric waited until Friday morning, coffee brewed, suitcase in the hallway, jacket zipped halfway up, before casually announcing he was taking a long weekend to clear his head. Monica barely looked up from her protein smoothie. Finally, she muttered, maybe you'll come back more centered. He paused just long enough to file that line away, then walked out the door like a man defeated. By noon, he and Drew were halfway across state lines. Stephen Wexler worked at a mid-tier marketing agency in a grim glass building off I-84. The kind of place where failed dreams wore lanyards and drank cold brew from company-branded cups. Drew had already arranged the meeting, casual, off the books, no office gossip. They met in a conference room with no windows. Stephen showed up in a hoodie this time, looking more nervous now that he knew the truth. She said you were long gone, man, he said, setting his phone down and fidgeting with his ringless fingers. Told me you ran off after some meltdown and left her with nothing. She said you were spiritually unstable. Eric stared at him across the table. Did that sound believable to you? Stephen shrugged. She cried when she said it. Of course she did. Drew slid a document across the table. We need this signed. Read it. Don't skim. Stephen looked at it. His eyes darted. It laid everything out, the timeline, the texts, the nights spent together, the conversations about starting fresh, and most crucially, that Monica explicitly told him she was single, that she wanted a child with him, that he believed the pregnancy was mutual, intentional, and above all, based on a lie. I'm not trying to screw her over, Stephen muttered, scanning the final paragraph. I didn't sign up for this. I thought I was the good guy helping a woman rebuild. Eric didn't blink. You weren't the good guy. You were the tool. That landed. Stephen stopped talking. Drew placed a small recorder on the table. Optional, but recommended. Stephen looked at it, then nodded. Hit the red button. What followed was a 23-minute confession. Calm. Linear. Devastating. He admitted he thought Monica was divorced. That she initiated everything. That he believed the child was theirs until last week, when she stopped answering his texts. That she once hinted she'd take whatever she could get in a separation. That she talked about inheritance. About custody. About moving somewhere sunny with child support. Eric just listened. No reactions. No interruptions. After Stephen signed the statement, Drew handed him a final envelope, an NDA, a severance clause of sorts. If Stephen kept his mouth shut until the court date, he'd never hear from either of them again. Wexler took it. Signed. Stood up slowly. As he walked toward the door, he paused. She's good, you know. Scary good. I thought she actually loved me. Eric finally spoke. Quiet. Measured. You're not the first man she's lied to. Stephen gave a hollow laugh. Guess misery loves company. Eric waited until the door closed behind him. Then he turned to Drew. 2 weeks. Drew nodded. Plenty of time. Back in town, Monica texted him that night. A heart emoji. First one in months. Then, hope you're getting the clarity you needed. I feel like something good is coming for us. Eric stared at it, then put his phone face down, just like she always did. It started with balloons and ended with silence. Monica wanted a tasteful gender reveal. Nothing tacky, she insisted. No popping balloons in public parks or confetti cannons in the backyard. She chose a muted garden brunch with pastel napkins and artisan cupcakes dyed blue or pink on the inside. She wore white, again, and spoke to the florist like she was royalty. Eric played the part, nodded when asked about colors, agreed when she said, "It's time we turn the page." He even bought the damn hydrangeas himself, drove across town to get the exact shade she wanted, soft lavender with hope. Hope. That's what Monica kept using lately. Hope for the future. Hope we can rebuild. Hope the baby will bring peace. It was almost poetic, how confidently she planned the day her house of cards would collapse. The morning of the party, Eric stood in the backyard helping hang paper lanterns. Monica was inside icing cupcakes. Her playlist hummed from the kitchen speaker, acoustic covers of love songs, all carefully curated for emotional resonance. She wanted the moment filmed, shared, remembered. She had no idea that while she texted the bakery, Eric's lawyer was submitting the divorce petition under sealed costs. No public record, no social media trails. Just a quiet, lethal document dropped like a scalpel into the court system. The reason for the seal? Potential criminal misrepresentation regarding paternity and inheritance. Heavy words, carefully chosen. At noon, the guests arrived. Mostly her friends. People who smiled through their teeth and whispered about how brave she is. One woman brought a book called Motherhood as Rebirth and cried when Monica said, "This baby is a miracle." Eric stood beside her, smiling. Even kissed her temple during the photo op. She looked up at him with soft eyes, like she believed everything was healing. He handed her the cupcake box. "Want to do the honors?" She bit. Pink. Cheers. Applause. Someone snapped a photo of Eric holding her hand. He almost laughed. 2 days later, while she was out shopping for baby clothes, a courier arrived at their doorstep. She opened the envelope standing in the driveway. Eric was watching from the upstairs window. He saw her jaw slacken, then tremble. She didn't drop the papers. She just stood there, frozen, like a deer realizing the headlights aren't stopping. An hour later, his phone rang. Monica's voice was sharp, panicked. "What the hell is this?" Eric didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch long enough for her breathing to quicken. "You're divorcing me?" she snapped. "After everything?" He waited, then said, flatly, "Bring your lawyer. You'll need one." She started yelling. Accusations. Denials. Then begging. Then bargaining. He hung up without another word. Later that night, she emailed a list of reasons they should pause and talk. Attached was a digital scan of their wedding photo, with a quote about forgiveness. Eric didn't open it. Instead, he sent one short message to Cassandra Banks. Phase 2. Time to bring it all in. The calm was over. The storm was invited. The courtroom smelled like cheap carpet and expensive lies. Monica arrived early, dressed like a grieving widow at a donor brunch. Subtle makeup, no jewelry except her wedding ring back on her finger after 6 months of absence, and a belly she cradled like it was a shield. Her lawyer, a sleek woman named Denise with a voice like warm glass, had rehearsed her opening so many times it came out like a TED Talk. "Mrs. Rollins," she began, with just the right trimmer, "has remained committed to this marriage despite emotional distance brought on by her husband's instability and detachment." Eric didn't even blink. "She has endured isolation, dismissiveness, and despite these challenges, has focused on creating a safe, loving environment for the child she carries, whom she believed would be raised in a home built on forgiveness and reconciliation." Eric adjusted his tie, tilted his head slightly, like he was just appreciating the performance. Then his lawyer stood. Cassandra Banks wasn't flashy. No courtroom theatrics. Just a calm, educated woman in a charcoal suit with surgical precision in her language. "Your Honor," she said, handing a folder to the bailiff, "we submit the following. A full paternity test conducted independently through a licensed clinic, cross-verified by a secondary lab." The judge opened the folder. Silence. Then came the second envelope. A notarized record of Eric's vasectomy, dated, signed, medically certified. A flicker of confusion crossed Monica's face. She turned toward Denise, who whispered something back without meeting her eyes. Then Cassandra continued, "We've also included location data, photographs, and time-stamped records of the petitioner's meetings with a man named Stephen Wexler, who will be referenced in the next document." She handed over a third envelope. Eric didn't look at Monica. He looked at the judge. "This," Cassandra said, "is an affidavit signed by Mr. Wexler. It includes a full account of his relationship with the petitioner, including her repeated insistence that she was single, abandoned, and pursuing motherhood alone. The judge's brow furrowed deeper with each page. He also testifies that he was misled into believing he was the biological father of the child, and that he now disavows any ongoing relationship with the petitioner. Denise tried to object, mumbling something about unverified third-party bias. Cassandra, without even looking over, said coolly, "The document is signed, witnessed, and already on file with the clerk." Monica's mouth parted slightly. She turned to Eric for the first time, eyes wide, lips moving, but no sound came out. He just raised one eyebrow. The judge placed the last paper down, pinched the bridge of his nose, then looked directly at Monica. "Is there any part of this you wish to dispute before we proceed?" Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. Monica didn't respond. Not to her. Not to the judge. Not to anyone. Because in that moment, surrounded by institutional lighting and silent stares, Monica Rollins understood something. She had walked into this courtroom thinking the worst-case scenario was losing a few assets. She didn't realize the floor she was standing on was already sawed in half. And Eric? Eric hadn't said a single word. But he'd already buried her. The judge had just finished reviewing the affidavits when Cassandra spoke again. Calm. Almost casual. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to call a final witness." Monica turned to her lawyer, visibly confused. Denise whispered something sharp under her breath, something Monica clearly didn't expect to hear. Then the courtroom doors opened, and the air changed. Not Stephen, not some angry neighbor or PI with a folder of time-stamped photos. It was him, Dr. Philip Harlan, her former therapist, the man Monica once said was too clinical to be helpful, but whom she continued seeing for over a year after their trial separation. He walked in slowly, gray slacks, blazer, calm as ever. A man who looked like he belonged at a university lectern, not a divorce hearing. Monica's confusion twisted into something else, recognition first, then dread. She gripped the table, whispered to Denise, "He can't do this." Cassandra spoke first. "Dr. Harlan, you're here today under legal subpoena. Thank you for complying." The judge nodded. "You may proceed." Eric sat perfectly still, watching Monica as she unraveled in slow motion. Her nails dug into her notepad. Her mouth parted, as if ready to interrupt, then snapped shut again when Dr. Harlan took the stand. "I'm a licensed clinical psychologist," he began, voice steady, "specializing in relationship trauma, identity reintegration, and post-affair recovery. Mrs. Rollins was my patient for approximately 15 months. And during those sessions," Cassandra asked, flipping through her notes, "did she ever discuss plans concerning her marriage, her husband, or her future as a parent?" Monica's lawyer stood. Objection, patient-therapist privilege. But Dr. Harlan was already nodding. Under ordinary circumstances, yes. However, Mrs. Rollins signed a release form in February of last year, specifically allowing disclosure of any session notes pertaining to legal disputes, should they arise. Denise turned to Monica, eyes wide. "You signed a waiver?" she hissed. Monica shook her head. I don't remember. He said it was standard." Too late. Cassandra handed over a copy. The judge verified it. Signature, initials, time-stamped. "Ironclad," Dr. Harlan continued, this time reading directly from his records. "Session dated May 14th. Mrs. Rollins stated, quote, 'I've waited long enough. I'm getting pregnant this year. With or without Eric. This baby is part of my plan to finally separate and rebuild on my terms.'" Gasps. Low ones at first. Then someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Eric didn't blink. Dr. Harlan flipped to the next page. She added, "If he finds out, it'll be too late. I'm not asking permission anymore. This baby changes the narrative." Monica looked like she'd been tasered. Her lawyer was stone-faced. No more objections. No more strategy. Just damage control. Monica leaned toward the judge. "He's twisting my words. Those were hypothetical, emotional moments. He's misrepresenting me." The judge raised a hand. "You'll have a chance to respond. For now, remain seated." But Monica didn't. She stood, then sat, then stood again, shaking now. She turned to Eric, eyes pleading. "This isn't what it looks like." Eric stared through her like she wasn't even there. Dr. Harlan calmly handed over his session notes, signed and sealed. The courtroom had gone ice cold. No more performance. No more control. Just Monica, caught between a baby she used as leverage and the man she thought would always be too polite to fight back. And now? He hadn't lifted his voice once, but she was already falling apart. Cassandra didn't flinch. She reached into her briefcase with clinical ease, as if producing a pen. But what she placed on the table instead was a flash drive. Labeled, time-stamped, certified. Your Honor, she said, tone precise and deadly. With the court's permission, we'd like to submit audio evidence, recorded with consent, captured during a session between Mrs. Rollins and Dr. Harlan. The content directly pertains to marital intent, financial manipulation, and premeditated fraud. Monica's chair let out a faint squeal as she gripped the edge of the table, white-knuckled. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. Denise reached for her arm, maybe to calm her, maybe to brace for impact. Too late either way. The judge nodded. The bailiff plugged in the drive. A small black speaker clicked on. Silence. Then, a woman's voice. Familiar. Crystal clear. Not crying. Not unsure. Just Monica. Calm. Smug, unhurried. I'm just waiting for the baby to be born. Then I'll divorce him and take everything. He'll think it's about hormones or stress or whatever. He's passive like that. He won't see it coming. No one breathed. Not the court clerk. Not the gallery. Even Denise froze mid-blink. The voice continued. The key is timing. If I do it too soon, he'll panic and try to fight. But if I wait until the baby's here, he'll be emotionally cornered. He won't risk looking like a deadbeat. That's when I'll hit him with custody, the house, everything. I've earned it. I've played the long game. Someone gasped behind Eric. The judge held up a hand to pause the recording, but Cassandra spoke first. Your Honor, the rest of the recording includes language regarding financial deception, coordinated falsehoods presented to Mr. Wexler, and explicit intent to mislead the court regarding the child's parentage. We're happy to continue if necessary. The judge looked down, then across to Monica. She looked small now. Hollow. The color drained from her face so fast, it was like someone had pulled the plug from inside her chest. Monica stood, shakily. That was taken out of context, she said, voice cracking. You don't understand? I was angry. I didn't mean it. Eric didn't even lift his gaze. His arms were folded. Still. Cold. Unshaken. I was venting, she tried again. That was a fantasy, just thoughts I had. People say things in therapy. The judge turned to her. Are you denying the authenticity of the recording? I didn't know it would be used like this. Denise whispered something sharp to her, but Monica ignored it. She turned now, fully, toward Eric. There were tears in her eyes, but they came too late. And they weren't for him. Eric, please. We can talk. This doesn't have to be how it ends. Eric finally looked up, not at her, at the judge, and nodded. It was all the permission Cassandra needed. The defense rests, Your Honor. The judge leaned back in his chair, face pale, lips pressed thin. Then he exhaled, slow and final. A man who had just watched a castle collapse from the inside. I'll be issuing a decision shortly, he said. The court clerk stood, but the room stayed silent. Because everyone knew. This wasn't just about adultery. It was strategy, lies, a dismantling from within. And now Monica was no longer the one holding the match. She was standing in the ash, barefoot, with nothing left to burn. The gavel hit the bench like a shot through bone. Full divorce granted. Sole temporary custody awarded to Mr. Rollins, pending psychological evaluation of the petitioner. Immediate removal from the marital residence is hereby ordered. All financial assets frozen until further proceedings. Court is adjourned. The judge didn't look at Monica when he said it. He didn't need to. She was already crumbling. The courtroom buzzed as people stood, whispering. Spectators blinked like they'd witnessed a slow-motion car crash, the kind you don't want to see, but can't look away from. Monica stood in the center of it all, lips parted, eyes darting like a hunted animal that finally realizes it's been inside a cage the entire time. Denise tried to say something to her, but Monica didn't hear it. She was too busy staring at Eric. He didn't glance her way. Not once. He stood slowly, adjusted his cuffs with methodical grace, and nodded to Drew, who'd been seated silently in the back row the whole time, arms crossed, like a bodyguard to truth. Dr. Harlan joined them. The three men, calm, solid, unshakable, walked past Monica in perfect silence. No words, no nod, not even a flick of acknowledgement. It was the most deafening absence she'd ever felt. She turned to follow them with her eyes, trembling. That's when the bailiff tapped her on the shoulder. "Mrs. Rollins," he said. She turned, dazed. He handed her a second envelope. Unmarked, crisp, heavy with something that didn't belong in a courtroom. She tore it open, fingers fumbling. One page. One sentence. Typed, centered, no signature. "I trusted you once." She read it. Then read it again. And again. Because it didn't scream. It didn't accuse. It just existed. A quiet, clinical obituary for a marriage she thought she'd outsmarted. She dropped to the bench in the hallway, legs barely holding. People passed her, eyes avoiding hers. Whispers starting again. But this time not about her strength. Not about her resilience. Not even about the baby. Only about how fast someone can fall when they think they're the puppeteer, only to realize the strings were wrapped around their own neck the entire time. Stephen never returned her calls. Her friends stopped replying. And the baby? She'd never raise it in the house she once planned to steal. Because Eric was already changing the locks. By nightfall, the security code had been reset. The name on the mailbox removed. The lavender candles boxed up and left in the garage. And the man she called weak? He never had to raise his voice. He just waited, watched, and walked away exactly when it would hurt the most. "You're a failure. A man who never became anything." She said it with the same tone she'd used to remind me we were out of milk, flat, dismissive, like a fact she'd known for years but had just now decided was worth stating aloud. Our daughter blinked once but kept chewing. Our son shifted in his seat but didn't look up from his plate. The mashed potatoes might as well have been concrete. Even the dog, always hopeful for scraps, slunk off into the hallway like he knew something had cracked open in the house. I didn't say a word. I reached for my napkin, wiped my hands, folded it with an absurd kind of care, and stood up. Walked past her, past the casserole dish still steaming, into the hall closet. There was dust on the duffel bag. I hadn't touched it since my brother's fishing trip in '09. I shook it once, felt its old weight return to my hand, and started packing. Not clothes. Not toothbrushes. Not essentials. Just the few things that mattered. My sketch pad from the years before the kids, a fountain pen I'd inherited from my dad, and a photo Ruth had taken of me in '93, laughing so hard my sunglasses slipped off. Marcia had always hated that photo. Said it made me look unserious. Funny how that's the one I kept. Behind me, her voice echoed down the hall, dripping with smugness. "Oh, please. Like you've got somewhere to go." Still, I didn't speak. Just zipped the bag, slow, mechanical, final. The sound was sharper than her voice. My shoes were by the radiator. I slid them on like a man going to work, grabbed my keys, and opened the front door. "Seriously, Glenn," she called out behind me. "What, are you just gonna walk away like a coward?" The wind outside wasn't cold, but it carried the kind of bite you feel behind your ribs. I stepped out anyway. Didn't slam the door. Just let it close behind me like the soft click of a vault ceiling shut. No bags packed for guilt. No suitcases filled with second chances. She'd pulled the pin. I just walked away from the grenade. The truth is, she'd been practicing that line for weeks. Maybe months. I'd seen it brewing in the way she stopped touching my arm when she passed, how she started calling me him when she talked to her sister on speakerphone, like I was already a memory in progress. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was the inconvenient furniture she didn't know how to move. And maybe I had stayed too long. For the kids. For the routine. For the delusion that one day she'd look at me the way she used to, like I was a man worth something. But not anymore. Because the silence that followed her words said everything the kids didn't. They weren't shocked. They weren't even uncomfortable. They were numb. Conditioned. Like this was just another Thursday dinner where Mom said something sharp and Dad swallowed it whole. Except this time, I didn't. I walked 3 blocks to the old bench near Maple and 7th, sat down, pulled out that photo Ruth had taken and held it up to the streetlight. The smile on my face, young, wild, unfiltered, looked like a stranger. But something about it still burned in my chest. There was a bar across the street with one of those neon signs that buzzed every time the door opened. I didn't go in. I just sat there, watching strangers come and go, and let the weight in my chest settle into something solid. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. Let her think I was bluffing. Let her think I'd come crawling back in a day or two, tail between my legs, begging for re-entry into a life where my worth was measured by how quiet I stayed. She thought she ended something at that table. She had no idea she'd just set something on fire. Marcia poured herself a second glass of Pinot and dropped into the leather recliner like she was claiming a throne. One leg draped over the armrest, phone to her ear, wine glass swaying just above the carpet. Yes, I swear to God, Sharon. He just stood up and left, like a moody teenager with a poetry journal. Pause. Laughter. The kind of brittle laugh that masks something she hadn't yet named. No, he didn't yell. Didn't throw a tantrum. Just packed that old fishing bag, remember that ugly green one? And walked out. Like I'm supposed to chase him or something. She said it like a joke. But the punchline never landed. The silence after her laugh was longer than it should have been. She hung up a few minutes later, poured another inch of wine, and stood at the patio door, watching the empty driveway. Glenn's car was gone. The porch light flickered once and died. The only sound in the house was the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional creak from upstairs, two kids who hadn't said a word after dinner. No, where's Dad? No, what just happened? They just disappeared into their rooms like ghosts clocking out of a long shift. She checked her phone again. No missed calls. No texts. No long-winded messages filled with apologies or excuses. Just a dark screen and a faint reflection of her own face staring back. By midnight, the bravado started to slip. The TV was still on, some late-night talk show she wasn't listening to, but she kept glancing at the front door like it owed her a performance. One last dramatic return. A grovel. An argument. Something. Instead, silence. At 12:17 a.m., she called him. No answer. She left a message. Something breezy, like, "Hope you're not sleeping in your car, Glenn. It's 42 degrees out. But hey, live your truth." She regretted the tone before she even ended the call. By 1 a.m., she tried again. Straight to voicemail. She slept on the couch. Or tried to. Her neck cramped, and her arm kept falling asleep. She didn't want to admit it, but the house felt off, like someone had ripped out a foundation beam and left everything sagging. At 7:06 a.m., she gave up and shuffled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and sour. The kids were still asleep. She brewed coffee, trying to shake off the headache that had bloomed behind her eyes. The kettle hissed, the toaster popped, and for a second she convinced herself the world was still spinning normally. Then she walked to the window, and everything stopped. Across the street, at the corner cafe, Glenn sat at a small table under a striped awning. Hair combed. Wearing that gray jacket she once said made him look like a history professor, before she told him to throw it out. He looked comfortable. And he wasn't alone. Sitting across from him, nursing a cappuccino and laughing at something he'd just said, was Ruth. Ruth. Marcia's hand spasmed. The coffee cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the tile. The sound didn't register. All she could see was Ruth's face. A little older, yes, but still infuriatingly serene. Her blonde hair was shorter now, cut just below the ears, and she wore the same smug calm she used to have before Marcia called her a husband-hunting leech 9 years ago. They hadn't spoken since. And yet here she was, sitting with Glenn like they'd never skipped a beat. Like the last decade of tension and silence had never happened. Marcia stood frozen, barefoot on cooling tile, coffee dripping between her toes. She didn't know what stung more, seeing Ruth, or seeing Glenn smile. Not the tired, filtered one he used to force around her friends. This one was effortless. Real. A man freed of something. She grabbed her phone. Opened their old thread. What are you doing with her? She watched the 3 dots appear. Then vanish. Then nothing. Left on read. Marcia stared out the window, heart pounding like a distant war drum. She had no script for this. No precedent. He was supposed to be broken. Not having coffee. Not laughing. And definitely not with her. 9 years ago, Ruth disappeared from Marcia's life like a book yanked off a shelf mid-sentence. No goodbye. No closure. Just one explosive fight in the middle of a backyard barbecue and the ghost of a friendship that never got a funeral. It started, as most implosions do, with a glance. Not a touch. Not a confession. Just one stupid glance. Marcia had come out with a tray of burgers, saw Ruth tilt her head toward Glenn while he was showing her some sketches, blueprints for the house they were renovating. Ruth laughed at something, touched his arm for a second too long, and that was it. Later that night, after the guests had left, the wine had dried up, and the citronella candles were all but smoke, Marcia said. Don't think I don't notice the way she looks at you. Glenn blinked, confused. What? Ruth. She's always got some excuse to be near you. Always asking about your stupid projects. He had chuckled then. God help him. Are you jealous of Ruth? Wrong answer. By morning, Ruth had received a text that started with, I don't know what your game is, but it ends now, and ended with a sentence so venomous it still made Marcia flush to remember it. Ruth blocked her number, packed up and moved out of state. No more book club. No more wine nights. No more of that endless talking about nothing for hours friendship that once felt like a sisterhood. And now here she was, in Glenn's chair, at Glenn's cafe, laughing like she belonged. Marcia hadn't moved from the window in 30 minutes. The curtain edge dug into her palm as she gripped it like a lifeline, breath shallow, eyes locked on the two of them. Ruth sipped her coffee like royalty, chin slightly tilted, lips curled into that subtle smirk Marcia remembered too well. Glenn leaned forward, elbows on the table, listening like what she said actually mattered. He never leaned in like that for me. The thought punched its way through Marcia's brain before she could strangle it. She pulled out her phone again. What are you doing with her? Sent. Delivered. Read. And then nothing. That blue checkmark burned like acid. No reply. No typing dots. No explanation. The fact he left her on read was worse than any insult. Worse than if he had replied with some cryptic jab. Glenn never ignored her. Not even in their worst fights. Even when he was fuming, he was always the one who needed to talk it through. Calm. Rational. Boringly decent. But this version of him? This version had her completely off script. Across the street, Ruth reached into her purse and handed him something. A postcard, maybe. Glenn looked down, smiled again. Ruth laughed hard, head thrown back. The kind of laugh that came from deep comfort, not awkward flirtation. The casual intimacy of it made Marcia feel like she'd swallowed nails. She scanned their faces for cracks. Signs of manipulation. Anything to tell her this wasn't real, that Ruth was playing him, or that Glenn was faking it just to get back at her. But no, the warmth was real, and that terrified her. She stepped away from the curtain. Her pulse drummed in her ears. Ruth was dangerous in a way Marcia never anticipated, subtle. She never shouted. She never demanded. She simply existed in a way that made people lean toward her. And now Glenn was leaning. Marcia dropped into the kitchen chair, gripped the edge of the table, and stared at her phone like it owed her an answer. She had burned Ruth to protect her marriage. And now Ruth was the one rebuilding it, from the outside, brick by stolen brick. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. The kind where every scrape of the fork against the plate feels like someone scratching a chalkboard in your skull. Marcia had reheated some pasta, tossed a bagged Caesar salad in a bowl, and called the kids down like everything was normal. It wasn't. Emma came first, her headphones still around her neck, hair tied back in that lazy half bun she always did when she didn't care to impress. 15, and already smarter than Marcia liked to admit. Logan followed a minute later, phone in hand, barely glancing at the table before sitting down. They ate in silence for maybe 3 minutes. Long enough for Marcia to almost believe the kids hadn't noticed anything. That Glenn's absence hadn't punctured the air. And then Emma said it, like it was just a passing weather report. Dad looked happy today. The fork slipped from Marcia's hand and clattered against the plate. You saw him? She asked too quickly. Emma shrugged. Yeah, after school. Me and Abby stopped for smoothies. He was across the street at that new cafe. Marcia tried to play casual, but her throat went dry. Was he alone? Another shrug. No, he was with Aunt Ruth. That name hit the table like a hammer. Marcia blinked. Ruth? Emma didn't even look up. Yeah, that's what you always called her, right? Aunt Ruth. She's not your aunt. Marcia snapped. Too loud. Too fast. She caught herself. I mean, she hasn't been around for a long time. Emma finally raised her eyes. She seemed nice. Dad was laughing. Then, like the universe had a sixth sense of timing, Logan chimed in without looking up from his phone. He never looked like that when he lived here. The room went still. Marcia stared at him. Excuse me. Logan kept scrolling. I'm just saying. He always looked tired. You know, worn out. Emma pushed her plate forward, done eating. He didn't even see me. But he looked different. Like he'd slept for a change. Marcia's brain scrambled to find footing. Well, she said, voice tight. Ruth always liked attention. She probably invited him out to stir things up. She's good at that. Emma gave her a look. The kind of look that wasn't rebellious, just tired. I thought you said she hated him, she said. You always told us Ruth couldn't stand Dad. Marcia opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The lie was too old to repurpose, too brittle to bend. Emma pushed back her chair and stood. Anyway, I've got homework. She was already halfway to the stairs when she added, over her shoulder, they didn't look like people who hated each other. Logan finished chewing, then stood too. Can I stay at Mason's Friday night? Marcia blinked. We'll see. He nodded and walked away. No hug. No thanks, Mom. Just gone. Marcia sat alone at the table, half a bowl of salad wilting in front of her. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't heavy with absence. It was crowded. Every word she'd ever fed those kids about Glenn, about Ruth, about who loved who and who abandoned what, suddenly felt like a fragile old script being rewritten right in front of her. And now, they weren't reading from her pages anymore. Marcia didn't knock. She pounded, for sharp, angry thuds that made the brass door knocker rattle like a warning bell. Unit 3B, third floor walk-up. The hallway smelled like dust and citrus cleaner, and she'd taken the stairs two at a time like a woman on a mission to reclaim her territory. The door creaked open. Ruth, barefoot, calm, hair pinned back in that lazy French twist she used to do when they were friends. No makeup, just soft, unbothered skin, and that maddening expression, like she'd expected this exact moment down to the minute. You think this is funny? Marcia hissed, stepping forward like she might barge in without permission. Ruth didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She just tilted her head slightly and, to Marcia's disbelief, stepped aside. If you're going to throw a tantrum, at least come inside where the neighbors won't record it. Marcia pushed through the doorway like a storm, then stopped cold. Glenn was sitting cross-legged on the rug, flipping through a crate of vinyls. There was an old Billie Holiday album on top, Lady in Satin, and he was holding it delicately like it meant something. He didn't even look up. Not now, Marcia, he said. Calm. Measured. Like this was just an interruption during some lazy Sunday routine. We're busy. The room smelled like lavender and wood polish. A jazz record hummed softly from the corner. There was a tray on the coffee table with two mismatched mugs and a slice of lemon cake. Marcia looked around, books stacked neatly by the fireplace, soft throws draped over chairs, one of Glenn's old pencil sketches framed on the wall. A place that didn't scream luxury, but screamed him. You've got to be kidding me, she muttered. This is where you ran to? Some patchwork tea party with her. Ruth walked around her slowly, picked up the teapot, and began pouring into one of the mugs. Would you like some tea? She asked, her voice dripping with a softness that only made the sting sharper. Or were you hoping for a little more control today? Marcia clenched her fists. You think this is about control? You think I give a damn about you? Glenn finally looked up. His eyes were tired, but not the kind of tired she remembered. This wasn't work-exhausted or family-worn. It was the kind of tired you feel when someone drags you back into a mess you already cleaned up and walked away from. I told you, he said, setting the record down gently. I'm not playing this game anymore. Marcia's mouth twitched. You're really just gonna pretend none of this matters? The house? The kids? The years? You made that decision for both of us the night you called me a failure in front of our children, he said, voice low but firm. You wanted to humiliate me. You did. Congratulations. But you don't get to dictate what comes next. Ruth sat on the armrest beside him, not touching him, not gloating, just present. Marcia's eyes darted between them, searching for some crack, some weakness, something she could use. But all she saw was stillness. They weren't rushing to defend themselves. They weren't arguing. They weren't trying to hurt her. They were just living. And that realization gutted her deeper than any insult could have. You're pathetic, she snapped, voice cracking at the edges. Both of you. Glenn shrugged. That's okay. I've been worse. Marcia's breath hitched. She felt the room closing in, the air thick with the one thing she couldn't control, indifference. Ruth sipped her tea. You should go, Marcia. This isn't your scene anymore. No yelling. No dramatic slap. No pleading. Just quiet rejection. The kind that lasts longer. Hurts deeper. As Marcia turned to leave, the door didn't slam behind her. Ruth didn't follow. Glenn didn't watch. They just let her go, like someone tossing away the last thread of a story that no longer made sense. Marcia slammed the front door behind her hard enough to rattle the glass. The sound of it reverberated through the empty house, but there was no one to flinch at it, no one to glare at her, no one to ask her what was wrong. She kicked off her heels, marched to the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of wine with shaking hands. It sloshed over the rim. She didn't care. Her blood felt like it had crystallized, pulsing hot through her temples. That smug little apartment. That smug little teapot. That smug little Ruth. She stormed into the dining room, yanked open her laptop, and dropped into the chair like it owed her answers. She cracked her knuckles once, twice. The screen glowed to life. Search, Ruth Adler. She scrolled through the usual noise, old alumni updates, a couple of LinkedIn mentions. Nothing scandalous. No recent arrests. No tragic bankruptcy. Not even a bad Yelp review. Marcia clicked open Facebook. Ruth's profile wasn't private. Of course it wasn't. She always was one of those insufferably open people who pretended their transparency made them virtuous. Marcia scrolled past beach photos, dinner parties, random nature shots with vague captions like, collecting light, not things. Then she stopped. A photo, posted 4 days ago. Ruth, in denim overalls, standing barefoot on a half-painted porch, holding a paint roller in one hand. Behind her, Glenn, kneeling on one knee, reaching into a tray of white paint. His sleeves were rolled up, sweat visible on his collarbone, and his face. He looked young, not in years, but in spirit. He was smiling, candid and unguarded, the same way he used to when they were first married and he'd surprise her with Chinese takeout on rainy days. Before kids, before expectations calcified into resentment. Marcia zoomed in instinctively, as if somehow the expression would change if she stared hard enough. The caption was short, almost cruel in its casualness. Turns out the best things come back when you stop chasing the wrong ones. Her stomach dropped. The room tilted slightly. She had to set the wine glass down before it slipped from her fingers. She hit the back button. Typed again, harder this time. Search, Glenn Hastings plus Ruth Adler. Search, Ruth Adler scandal. Search, Ruth Adler affair. Search, Ruth Adler lies. The pages loaded, one after another, but gave her nothing. No ammo. No dirt. Just smiling faces, overlapping friend groups, a post about Glenn helping organize a community mural downtown. She gritted her teeth and opened Glenn's old LinkedIn. Last updated 2 years ago. Still listed as independent architectural consultant. Still that black and white profile picture she hated. She tried his name in Reddit, Twitter, Instagram. Nothing. Not even a whiff of drama. Just silence and soft reemergence. The quiet kind of reentry that doesn't announce itself, but still lands like a rock through a window. She leaned back in her chair, fingers hovering over the keyboard, suddenly unsure of what she was even trying to accomplish. She thought she'd find evidence of Ruth manipulating him. Thought maybe Glenn had posted something bitter she could twist. She imagined finding a leaked text, an offhand comment, a photo out of context that could give her the upper hand again. Instead, she found peace. Their peace. And none of it included her. Marcia closed the laptop slowly. The room felt colder. Not winter cold, but hollow. Like a house long emptied of its real use. The worst part wasn't the caption. It wasn't even the photo. It was that neither of them were hiding. They didn't need to. Because they weren't afraid of her anymore. Control had slipped, so silently, so gradually, that she hadn't even noticed it was gone until now. And suddenly, the house she'd claimed as her fortress felt like a very large, very quiet museum. Full of exhibits no one visited anymore. She went all out. Roasted chicken, his recipe, though she'd never admit it, mashed potatoes from scratch, not boxed, and even the old green beans almondine that Logan used to beg for when he was 12. Candles flickered. Tablecloth freshly ironed. The good plates, not the chipped everyday ones. A dinner of false peace. A dinner to yank the reins back. The kids came down slowly, suspiciously, like they'd already smelled something off. Logan sat with his hoodie still on, headphones slung around his neck. Emma scrolled her phone as she chewed a piece of bread dry. No butter. Marcia plastered on her best mother voice. Light. Breezy. I thought it'd be nice. Just the three of us. Like old times. No one responded. They just ate. She cleared her throat. So, school going all right? Emma didn't look up. It's midterms. What do you think? Marcia sighed, tried again. Logan, didn't you say you were working on a film project? Something with the teacher who always wears the horrible neckties. Logan glanced up, one eyebrow raised. Mr. Deming? Yes. Him. What's he making you shoot now? Already turned it in. He went back to cutting his chicken. The silence wrapped around her like plastic wrap. Tight, sterile, hard to breathe through. She pushed her wine glass aside and leaned in. You know, we don't need your dad to have a nice night. It can still be us. The three of us. That's when Logan set his fork down. Not gently. Not a slam. Just deliberately. Can we invite Dad next time? The air snapped. Marcia blinked. What? Just saying. It's weird pretending he doesn't exist when he literally lives across town. She reached for her wine glass. Gripped the stem too hard. No, she said, voice cracking slightly before she smoothed it. He's seeing someone toxic. It's not healthy. For any of us. Silence. No reaction at first. Then Emma looked up. Slowly. Dead in the eye. You mean Ruth? Marcia hesitated. She's... Emma didn't let her finish. Because I talked to her. When I ran into them. She listened more in one coffee than you did all year. It hit like a blunt object. Fast. Undeniable. I'm your mother, Marcia snapped. Louder than she meant. You don't know her. You know me. Emma stood up calmly, pushing her chair back without the scrape. No, Mom. We knew you. We just didn't know it wasn't allowed to talk about it. Logan stood too, but not out of defiance. Just quiet resignation. I'm not picking sides, he muttered. But you can't act like he vanished. He didn't. You pushed him. The words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded lived in. Repeated silently for months, waiting for the valve to crack. Emma grabbed her plate. I'm eating upstairs. Emma, sit down. But she was already at the stairs. Logan lingered for a second. Looked at her with something between pity and exhaustion. Then followed. Marcia sat frozen. The food untouched on their plates. The candles burning lower. She had set the table like a general preparing for a truce, but found herself alone in a room that didn't recognize her command anymore. The rebellion wasn't loud. It was worse. It was calm, unapologetic, permanent. The envelope was thick, heavy almost, tucked between a credit card offer and a community water report. It stood out immediately, cream-colored with gold embossed edges. Addressed to Glenn. No return address. Marcia stared at it for a long moment. She shouldn't open it. Legally, morally, she shouldn't. But Glenn hadn't changed his address. And technically, it was still her mailbox. She slid it open with the back of a butter knife, careful not to tear. Inside, folded neatly between legal-sized documents, was a handwritten card and a notarized transfer of deed. Her eyes skipped the top line and landed on the signature. Ruth Adler. She scanned back up, jaw tightening. The document was clean, formal. Transfer of partial ownership of a property. Address listed just 2 towns over. A modest house on Oak Hill Road. 2 names on the document. Ruth Adler. Glenn Hastings. Not tenants. Not leaseholders. Owners. Together. The paper started to tremble between her fingers. She hadn't realized her hand was shaking until the text blurred. Tucked inside the folds was a small square card. Heavy cardstock. The kind of sentimental nonsense Ruth used to love. Pale blue, hand-trimmed edges, floral border. She opened it with 2 fingers, like it might bite her. Inside, written in Ruth's loopy script. For everything you gave up. Let's start from scratch, together. No date. No signature. Just that one sentence. Marcia sat down without meaning to. The dining room chair caught her as she dropped into it. The card fluttered to the table. She read the line again. Then again. Let's start from scratch, together. Not a weekend fling. Not a rebound. Not some emotional crutch in the aftermath of a midlife breakdown. This was a plan. Ruth wasn't a distraction. She was the plan. And Glenn had agreed. He hadn't just packed a bag. He'd walked towards something. Deliberately. With conviction. He wasn't wandering through grief. He was walking into a future she'd never been invited to see. She glanced at the card again. Her own reflection stared back from the glossy finish. Eyes wide. Mouth slightly open, like someone trying to remember how to breathe. All this time she'd framed Ruth as a saboteur, a snake, a threat. But snakes don't leave signed property deeds. This wasn't a betrayal. This was a transfer of everything. A slow, precise extraction of Glenn's life, from their house, from their family, from her, and into something that looked disgustingly whole. Marcia folded the document slowly, but her hands weren't cooperating. They kept trembling. She smoothed the card flat again with her palm, as if pressing it hard enough would erase the ink. But it stayed. Permanent. She looked around the room. At the stale fruit in the bowl, the dead flowers on the counter, the pile of unopened mail she'd been ignoring for days. And in that silence, a creeping fear threaded through her spine. This wasn't a phase. This was Glenn, finally choosing something without her voice in the decision. And what terrified her most wasn't the rejection. It was that he looked happy doing it. She didn't knock this time. Just stood there on Ruth's freshly painted porch, fists balled at her sides, lips pressed thin. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the world was already warm. Too warm for the sweater she'd thrown on in a panic. It clung to her skin like shame. A hanging fern brushed against her shoulder as she shifted weight from foot to foot, rehearsing different versions of what she might say. Apologies? No. She wasn't sorry. Warnings? Too late. Manipulation? Possibly. The door opened. Ruth, in slippers and a pale blue robe. Hair unbrushed. Face clean. The kind of undone that still looked put together. Marcia didn't waste time. I want to talk to Glenn. Alone. Ruth held her gaze for a beat. No reaction. Then, without a word, turned and walked back inside. A moment later, Glenn stepped out. He didn't lean on the doorframe. He didn't cross his arms to look defensive. No sighs. No emotion at all. Just a slow blink and a level stare. He looked like a man who'd already said everything he needed to say, and had no intention of repeating any of it. Marcia spoke quickly, almost breathless. I need a minute. That's all. 1 minute. Without her watching from behind the curtains. Glenn glanced over his shoulder briefly, then walked out onto the porch, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He folded his arms, not defensively, just to keep his hands still. Marcia tried to hold his eyes. Failed. Looked down at her shoes. We had a life, she said. Glenn, you can't just erase that. He tilted his head. Erase? No, but I don't have to carry it anymore. She stepped closer, voice tighter. You're really going to rewrite everything we built? Throw it away for some fantasy with a woman who ghosted the second things got real? He exhaled, not a sigh, more like clearing smoke from a room. I had a life, he said slowly. You had complaints. Marcia blinked. What? Every day? For 20 years. I gave everything I had, and it was never enough. If I bought groceries, you'd say I forgot the right brand. If I got home late, I was selfish. If I got home early, I was lazy. If I said I was tired, you rolled your eyes. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a project. And when I stopped performing, you labeled me a failure. In front of our kids. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. He stepped past her to the top stair, arms still folded, looking out over the quiet street. You want to talk legacy? That house we lived in. I designed every beam of it. The roofline, the kitchen flow, the east-facing windows. You picked out drapes. That was your contribution, complaints and drapes. Glenn. No, he said, holding up a hand. You don't get to rewrite now. This porch. I didn't build it, but I helped repaint it last weekend. It was 93 degrees. Ruth brought me lemonade and didn't ask me to be more than what I was. Marcia took a slow step forward. She's not me. She doesn't know what you're like after 2 decades. When the shine fades. When the patience wears thin. She doesn't know your silences. Or your stupid rituals. She's not ready for the real you. Glenn turned to face her again. Calm. Still. Like a man who had finally built a boundary he had no intention of moving. You're right, he said. She's not you. And that's exactly why I stayed. For a moment, it looked like she might cry. Instead, she scoffed. You think this little fantasy will last? He shrugged. I think anything would outlast resentment and a weekly performance review. The door opened behind them. Ruth stood there, holding a mug. Everything okay? Glenn nodded once. Yeah, we're done. He turned back to Marcia, gave her a slow, deliberate nod, then walked inside without another word. Marcia stood on the porch, stunned. The door didn't slam shut behind him. It closed softly, intentionally, the kind of final that doesn't beg for a return visit. And for the first time, she felt it. Not just the loss, but the powerlessness. She hadn't lost a man. She'd been replaced by peace. Saturday, 10:32 a.m. Same cafe. Same stupid striped awning. The same table Glenn had sat at the first morning after he walked out, with Ruth across from him, sipping cappuccino like she hadn't detonated Marsh's entire reality with one smile. But this time, there was something different. The way he leaned back in the chair. The way his hand rested on the table, not clenched, not guarded, but open, relaxed. And then there was the glint. A thin silver band on his left hand that caught the light just right, flashing like a warning beacon through the windshield of Marsh's parked SUV. She hadn't planned to be there. Or maybe she had. She told herself she was going to the pharmacy. She told herself it was coincidence. But the coffee in her cup was from a drive-through 20 minutes away, untouched, now cold. She sat in the driver's seat, hands locked around the steering wheel even though the car was in park. She hadn't blinked in minutes. Her eyes stung. Glenn reached forward and touched Ruth's hand across the table. Marcia nearly threw up. Her phone buzzed in the center console. She didn't move for it at first. It buzzed again. Then again. Finally, she swiped it open. Logan. She stared at the screen for a second. Then answered. Hey. His voice was casual, almost too casual. Hey, Mom. Just talk to Dad. Her stomach tightened. He said, you can have the house. Full transfer. He's moving in with Ruth full-time. She swallowed. He's, what? Logan didn't flinch. Yeah. Said it was already signed over. Papers should be coming soon. I guess you'll get the official notice, but just wanted to say, yeah, it's yours. The word yours tasted like metal. And, Logan hesitated. Also, Ruth invited us to the wedding. It's small. Just a backyard thing. But Emma and I are gonna go. Marcia's throat closed. You said yes. There was a pause. Not guilty. Just quiet. She makes him happy, Mom. That's not a crime. He hung up before she could respond. Across the street, Ruth leaned in and whispered something. Glenn laughed. It was soft. Real. Familiar. Marcia's eyes burned. This wasn't supposed to be how it ended. Glenn was supposed to spiral. He was supposed to age overnight, crumble without her, become some withered husk staring out windows wondering where it all went wrong. Instead, he rebuilt. Not with a 20-year-old rebound or a new car or a crisis beard. He rebuilt with Ruth, the one woman Marcia had cut out, cornered, discarded, and swore she'd buried forever. The one woman who never shouted back. The one woman she could never fully understand. Or control. Now, through a sheet of glass and 10 years of bitter distance, she watched them sip coffee and smile like two people who'd survived a war she thought she'd already won. The ring on his finger caught the light again. Marcia stared through the windshield. Tears welled but didn't fall. Her mascara held. Her grip on the wheel did not. She thought she broke him. But Glenn wasn't broken. He was free. You're not allowed to touch me unless I initiate. No kissing before I've had my collagen tea. Only these 3 positions, and don't make them weird. Lights off, always. That's how it started. She read them aloud like she was hosting a live stream, standing barefoot in yoga pants and a designer hoodie that said, alignment over expectation. She wasn't joking. Not even close. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. She placed the stapled papers, yes, stapled, right in front of me on the coffee table, next to the glass coaster she never used and the empty plate from the dinner I'd made. Vegan something. I can't remember. The list took all the air out of the room. Just so we're clear, she said, with that influencer tone she now used on everyone, including me. That sing-songy, breathy pitch where every sentence sounded like a TED Talk caption. This isn't a punishment. It's a recalibration of our intimacy dynamics. I didn't say a word. I just leaned back on the couch, pulled my glasses from the collar of my shirt, unfolded the pages, and began to read. Slowly. Quietly. No anger. No sarcasm. I wanted to give it the gravitas she apparently thought it deserved. Line by line, I studied this masterclass in passive-aggressive cruelty, wrapped in buzzwords and bullet points. Rule number 6. No more boring pajamas. Visual stimulation is part of connection. Boxers are okay, but only the dark ones, not those ones with the stars. Stars. She meant the navy pair with the constellation print, the ones I got from our trip to Maine. She laughed when I bought them. "You're such a dork," she said. "But you're my dork." Apparently not anymore. At the bottom of page 2, I paused. Not because I was shocked, but because the paper smelled faintly of lavender and toner. She had printed them at her co-working space, clearly. There was even a faint watermark in the corner. Conscious Women Collective. Cute. She thought she was coaching me, training me. Like I was a raw bundle of male dysfunction that needed to be rewired into a softer, more marketable husband. One that wouldn't interfere with her rebrand. Because that's what all this was, really, her rebrand. New hair, new voice, new schedule. And now? New marriage, too. One where she got to play the enlightened goddess, and I was just supposed to smile, nod, and adjust my libido accordingly. She stood there watching me like a professor grading a pop quiz. And then I looked up. No fury in my eyes. No wounded puppy stare. Just a steady, calculating stillness. I folded the pages neatly, pressed the crease, placed them back on the coffee table, right on that stupid plastic coaster she refused to throw away. The one with the faded palm tree and the words live, laugh, love, half scratched off. A relic from our honeymoon, long before hashtags replaced honesty. Then I said one line. Just one. "Do you want me to initial these at the bottom, or will a blood oath suffice?" Her lips parted. Not for a comeback, but because her breath actually caught. She hadn't expected sarcasm. She'd expected pleading, obedience, confusion, but not precision. She reached for the papers too fast, and her thumb ripped through them. The tear was ugly and loud in the quiet room, like fabric ripping at a funeral. "No, wait, I didn't mean Tom. Can we just talk for a second?" "Sure," I said, standing slowly. "But I'll need a list of approved conversation topics first." Her face fell. Whatever performance she'd prepared crumbled under that single sentence. I saw it, the exact second she realized I wasn't confused or offended. I was already done. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry. Not anymore. Anger would have meant I still cared. No, what I felt was clarity. Cold. Clean. Like a fresh spreadsheet with all the errors removed. I walked past her. I didn't slam the door. I didn't throw anything. But I did take that little plastic coaster with me. Not because it mattered, but because she thought it didn't. She used to leave her phone face up. Now it lay screen down, screen silent, screen sacred. The first time I noticed the shift was subtle. She flinched when I reached to hand it to her, like I might catch a virus through the lock screen. That was 3 months ago. Since then, the brand meetings had multiplied, and so had her caffeine intake and gym selfies. She'd come home flushed, glowing. Not the way you glow from cardio, the way you glow from being wanted. But I said nothing, just watched, like I always had. Funny thing is, she gave me the password. Not recently, not for this. It was back in January when she insisted we both try a digital detox challenge after reading some dopamine cleansing nonsense from a podcast host who used to sell teeth whitening kits. We installed a screen time tracker app, synced it to my iPad. She forgot. I didn't. I pulled it out after the commandments. Not that night, no. That night, I needed space. I needed the right kind of silence to digest what she'd handed me and the grotesque assumption behind it. That I'd nod along like a broken appliance grateful to be restarted. The next morning, while she was at her Monday yoga with Meg, I tapped open the app. The sync was still active. It loaded. The report wasn't flashy, just bar charts, timestamps, data. But it told me everything. Her top used app? Telegram. Not Instagram. Not her editing suite. Telegram. 3 private groups. One caught my eye, hollow_circle. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the icon, an Ouroboros tattooed on a man's forearm. She posted about it once, months ago. Some quote about embracing cycles and shedding ego. I remember because she captioned it. He gets it. I didn't click right away. I just stared at that snake eating its own tail, and suddenly the gym trips, the facials, the Thursday brand alignment dinners, all clicked into place. She was reinventing herself, from wife to something sexier, freer, more marketable. And he was helping. When I opened the chat transcript, I expected flirting. Maybe a nude. What I didn't expect was volume. His name, Zane, showed up 117 times in 7 days. I ran the count twice. Not emojis, not likes, full messages. Screenshots of her posts with captions like, "Think this angle makes me look too married?" Messages from him. "Nah, it makes you look expensive." Her, haha. "Don't tempt me." There were photos too. None explicit, but intimate in the way they were meant to look casual. A selfie of them with matcha lattes. A blurred one from across a rooftop bar. Her legs, crossed in a cabana chair, toenails painted red, Zane's hand clearly in frame, holding a wine glass. She'd captioned it, "Grateful Energy Blackheart." And I'd been at home that weekend, fixing the cabinet hinge she'd broken, slamming it shut over a missing protein bar. There were no gotcha moments. No smoking gun. Just a slow parade of moments where I watched my wife fall in love with her audience, and someone who wasn't me. And me? I was just there. Like a background app she forgot was still running. I didn't save the messages. Didn't print them out. What for? She hadn't betrayed me with a bang. It was a drift. A slow, deliberate unmooring dressed up as enlightenment. A woman with a husband who made her safe enough to forget that safety isn't the same as love, and who mistook my silence for absence. I closed the app, sat still, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel confused. I felt confirmed, and I knew exactly what the next phase of my plan would look like. Quiet. Surgical. I wouldn't even raise my voice. But she would. Eventually. Her captions always started the same way. "So grateful for this opportunity," or "feeling so aligned with this brand's mission," followed by 3 filtered photos of ocean sunsets, luxury pillows, and her holding a green smoothie like it was communion. She called them work trips. I started calling them line items. It wasn't hard. All her collabs were public. She wanted them to be. Hashtags, geotags, reels. She even filmed the lobby of one hotel while walking backward in heels. "Manifestation in motion," the caption said. I took notes. Every time she posted a trip, I pulled our shared credit card statement. Reagan never noticed or never cared that the business still ran through my name. When she launched her LLC last year, she asked me to be listed as co-founder just for the tax stuff, and I agreed. Because I was still the man who wanted to believe her passion wasn't just a prettier excuse to check out of our marriage. But now I was done believing. I was verifying. First was the Malibu trip. She said it was a 3-day rejuvenation partnership with a women's wellness startup. Their Instagram showed her doing yoga in branded leggings and sipping juice in front of eucalyptus. But our hotel receipt showed a double occupancy suite with a champagne brunch package and 2 spa appointments. I called the spa. "Hi," I said, cheerful. "My wife recently stayed there for a sponsored campaign and raved about your couple's massages. I'd love to surprise her by booking the same thing." The receptionist didn't hesitate. "Oh, that's sweet." Yes, Reagan and Mr. Kovac did the lavender stone treatment on Saturday. Very popular with influencers and their partners. Mr. Kovac. Zane Kovac. I didn't flinch. Just smiled, thanked her, and hung up. Then I did what any retired engineer would do. I opened Excel. Every trip, every brand name, every hashtag. Next to them, dates, locations, our account charges. Double occupancy confirmations. 2 entrees at the hotel restaurant. Extra ropes. One time, a rose petal arrangement with the message, "You're radiant." And then came the kicker. 2 months ago, she claimed to be in Arizona for a desert soul detox. But that same weekend, she made a video from a suite with a view I recognized. Not from her post, but from mine, years ago. Because we'd stayed in that exact hotel, that exact room, for our anniversary 6 years back. I even spotted the same wall art behind her. I remembered how she said it looked like someone framed regret. Now it framed her again, but with someone else out of shot. I kept every invoice. Printed them. Highlighted charges in yellow. Annotated with post links and timestamps. Then filed them into a black folder labeled simply, Honesty. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I left the folder in the drawer of the downstairs filing cabinet, the one where we kept her old podcast contracts and our tax documents. The same drawer she hadn't touched since 2021. It was hiding in plain sight, like me. She didn't know I knew. She still floated through the house with that smug, curated glow, like she'd gamed the system and I was too oblivious to see the reruns. But I saw them. I tracked the loops. I watched the pattern. What she didn't realize, what Zane definitely didn't realize, was that I was no longer part of their story. I was building my own. And in mine, every receipt was a trigger. Every sponsored getaway, an execution waiting to be scheduled. I sat at the old desk in the garage, the one she always said smelled like dust and death. It used to be my drafting space back when blueprints were on paper and not a subscription service. Now it was quiet, private, and still smelled like competence. Her list, her absurd manifesto of control, sat neatly beside me, reassembled with scotch tape for reference. I didn't need it to remember the bullet points. I needed it for structure, because now I had my own list. Mine didn't concern candles or lingerie or pre-approved bedroom scripts. Mine concerned disentanglement. 1. Separate financial accounts. I logged into our bank, still joint, still trusting, and initiated the division. Quietly, strategically, I rerouted my pension deposits, froze the autopays for her platforms. She wouldn't notice until she got a decline on her next creative consultation brunch. I labeled the transfers housekeeping. Felt appropriate. 2. Revoke shared authorizations. She'd used my name, my credit, on 3 of her business accounts, including her podcast hosting plan and the LLC formation. I filed terminations of interest. The forms were already printed. All it needed was a signature and a walk to the notary. 3. LLC share sale. I owned 49%. Not for control, just structure. She begged me to sign on as co-founder to look more grounded to brand partners. No? I drafted a clean sale back to her for $1. Filed it in a folder. Left the folder in the garage safe. Marked, finalize when necessary. 4. Tax liability separation. She laughed when I insisted we filed jointly under split allocations. You don't trust me? She joked. I smiled. I trust math more. That small clause gave me an out. Now I activated it. My portion of our joint returns? Isolated, locked, protected. 5. Legal notification of intent to divorce, unsent. Drafted. 2 pages. Attached with a copy of our prenuptial agreement. Yes, we had one. She made a big deal back then, just in case. You never know. She had no idea it was written by my old college roommate, now a tax litigator who owed me 3 favors. The prenup had a clause she never noticed. In the event of infidelity substantiated by mutual asset use, full dissolution with asset shielding is triggered. 6. Remove digital access. She shared my cloud drive for household files. I purged it, changed passwords, removed her devices from all synced accounts. She won't notice until she tries to download the quarterly budget to pretend she manages things. 7. Real estate valuation request. Sent. Just a quiet little inquiry to the firm that handled our purchase years ago. I requested a blind quote, pretending to explore refinancing. The goal wasn't to sell. It was to know exactly what I was walking away from and what she'd lose. 8. Canceled recurring charges tied to her business. 3 services were on my card. Her CRM, her scheduling software, and the analytics tool she bragged about during her How to Grow Your Brand live streams. Gone. All tied to me. All deactivated. 9. Social media blackout. I didn't unfollow. I didn't block. I just muted everything. Erased the apps. Scheduled deletion of my accounts. I wouldn't be part of her narrative anymore. I wouldn't be the mysterious husband in her morning routine videos, conveniently absent but implied. 10. The final clause. I wrote it on paper. Not digital. Not traceable. Just one line. If she asked for the list, deliver with coffee and silence. That one would be my little ceremony. I placed everything into a black leather folder and slid it into the bottom drawer of the garage desk. The same drawer that used to hold my old compasses and slide rules. Tools of precision. Reagan handed me a list of humiliations disguised as self-empowerment. I returned with 10 quiet detonations wrapped in paperwork. She wanted control over the bedroom. I now controlled the entire stage, and the curtains hadn't even opened yet. Sunday brunch. Her theater. She picked the spot, a bright little place with overpriced matcha and waiters in ironic aprons. She always liked that place. Said the lighting made her skin look creatively lit. She was wearing one of those wide-brimmed influencer hats that screamed, "I'm not like other women," even though she was exactly like every woman in that restaurant. Her friends were already seated when we arrived, all frosted lip gloss and performative wellness. They greeted me like a pet that learned a new trick. One even patted my hand and whispered, "It's so nice that you're still showing up, Tom." Like I was a dying houseplant she assumed had already been composted. I ordered coffee. Just coffee. They all asked for anti-inflammatory cocktails. Whatever the hell that means. Conversation buzzed, brand launches, a TikTok partnership, someone's retreat in Tulum where boundaries were expanded. Then Reagan launched into her set piece. It was rehearsed, I could tell. The pacing was tight, the pauses calculated. I just had to put my foot down, she said, buttering gluten-free bread like she was the main character in a Netflix miniseries. Like, he's great, but you know, men need structure. You train them with consistency. Little nudges. Reward the behavior you want. Ignore the rest. Laughter. Nods. Someone muttered, "Exactly." Someone else raised a mimosa in agreement. I reached into my coat pocket. "I'm glad you brought that up," I said, placing the envelope on the table beside her mimosa. "Because I've been following your rules. Here's what happens next." She froze. Not long. Just a flicker. But I saw it. The smile didn't drop. It cracked. She picked it up slowly. Her fingers hovered on the flap like it might be a trap. Then, with a forced smirk, she slid one manicured nail under the seal and pulled out the 3 folded pages inside. The first sheet bore the title, Commandment Compliance Review, Termination Summary. She skimmed it. I started. Bullet point 1. Effective immediately, all financial co-accounts have been severed. Bullet point 2. The LLC co-ownership has been legally dissolved. You are now sole proprietor and fully liable. Bullet point 3. All marital asset shielding clauses within the prenup are now in active motion due to confirmed misuse of joint funds for non-business romantic travel. Her breath hitched. She flipped to the second page. The hotel receipts. Highlighted entries. Spa for 2. Champagne turn-down service. A handwritten note beneath it. Grateful Energy Blackheart. Isn't deductible, by the way. She dropped it. The third page was a simple list. My list. My 10 steps. Itemized, signed, timestamped. Each dated. Each real. Each irreversible. I took a long sip of coffee. Her friends stared. One leaned in to glance. Reagan scrambled to gather the papers, but they slipped, fluttered to the floor. She snapped, "Don't look at that." Her voice cracked on the last syllable. The waiter brought my check before I asked. I signed it. "No tip. I'll leave you to the mimosas," I said, rising. "Thanks for brunch." She didn't say a word, just sat there, pale, her hat now looking like a costume. The woman who joked about training me had just discovered that I was the one who'd been counting steps. And she had just hit number 5. Half the restaurant watched me walk out. But Reagan? She didn't move. Because every shred of her performance was now unraveling in front of the only audience that mattered to her. And the show was just getting started. The first post went up less than 24 hours after brunch. A soft-lit selfie, her face half in shadow, wearing a linen robe she hadn't touched in months. The caption read, "Sometimes growth requires silence. Sometimes love means letting go of the version of you they preferred. Hashtag healing, hashtag alignment, hashtag divine feminine, hashtag no to breakup just her birth." Classic Reagan. I didn't respond. Instead, I scrolled. Because I knew her better than she thought I did. That post wasn't for me. It was for them, her audience. The carefully curated echo chamber that handed her dopamine in the form of heart emojis and fire reacts. She wanted sympathy without specificity. Victimhood without verification. Then came the second post. A black and white photo of a canyon, captioned, "Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks you get to own. Hashtag sacred space, hashtag reclaiming energy, hashtag some people never understand." Then came the deletions. Flirty selfies with Zayn vanished. So did the matcha moments with the suspicious hand in the background. She purged anything that hinted she'd ever been touched by someone other than the husband she was now pretending hadn't existed. The problem? Screenshots exist. And the internet is cruel. Someone leaked her DMs. I don't know who, probably one of her own followers. Or maybe one of those brunch hyenas who realized their queen had no throne. The first screenshot showed Reagan telling Zayn, "I don't even feel married when I'm around you," and "He's too old to notice anything anyway," smirking face dot. They were posted to a mid-sized gossip account that covers influencers who preach one thing and post another. The caption? This you, queen? Just checking. Hashtag conscious fraud. The comments were brutal. Didn't she post about radical honesty last week? Girl was married to a retiree and still doing TikTok dances with a side piece? LOL. Zayn dodged a bullet too. She treats men like discount promo codes. Still, I stayed silent. Not a comment. Not a tweet. Not a quote repost. I didn't need to fight the narrative. She was burning it herself. Then came the podcast episode. She titled it, Unbecoming for the Right Reasons. Just her voice, soft, trembly, almost reverent. A monologue about stepping away from misaligned energy and releasing people who suppress your evolution. The kicker? She claimed the real betrayal was emotional neglect in a stale marriage. That I withheld support while she blossomed. No names. But everyone knew. I let her have it. All of it. And then, someone posted the receipts. Not mine. The hotel ones. The champagne brunches. The couple massages. Even a screen grab of her telling a brand rep, yes, my husband is on board with this campaign. It's our shared story. Turns out, someone at that brand had flagged the discrepancy. Sent it to another brand. Then someone leaked the email chain. By week's end, her name showed up on 3 internal influencer blacklist spreadsheets. She still posted, of course. Now in sweaters. Hair pulled back. Earth tone backgrounds. Less contour, more raw honesty. One caption read, rebuilding. Slowly. Kindly. Quietly. But the algorithm didn't care. And neither did her audience. The likes halved. Comments turned surgical. Zayn hadn't posted since the leak. Her pinned video went from 80K views a week to 2.1K in 3 days. She still hadn't called me. Not once. Because she knew that behind every post, behind every smiling selfie and lesson-learned paragraph, I was still watching. And I hadn't even spoken yet. The first cancellation came with a smiley face. It was buried in a politely savage email from a wellness company she'd once bragged about partnering with. They'd flown her to Tulum, let her stay in some glass-walled retreat where she filmed a reel about harnessing solar frequency. She told me it was her dream collab. They really get me. Now, hi Reagan. After a comprehensive internal review, we feel your recent public alignment no longer reflects the values of our brand. We wish you continued growth on your personal journey. Seedling sparkles. No refund. No goodbye box. Just an untagged severance delivered like a hug with a knife tucked in. Reagan didn't mention it right away, but I saw the mood shift. She stopped singing in the mornings. Her laptop stayed closed longer. And her posture, always picture perfect, started to fold in at the shoulders, like the algorithm had taken something out of her spine. Then came the second, a skincare company. One she used to promote while lounging in our bathtub, her face slathered in clay like a modern Medusa. She said they'd made her feel seen. I remember because I was the one who took the damn product shots, holding her ring light while she cursed at her reflection for blinking during the timer. Their email was less poetic. Upon legal review of your partnership disclosure forms and use of marital narratives in campaign storytelling, we have chosen to discontinue all contracts. Please remove all branded content by Friday. Marital narratives. That was the phrase that broke her composure. Because it wasn't just a breakup. It was an accusation. They'd caught the lie. The influencer who painted her husband as supportive and spiritual and part of the vision had been secretly auditioning someone else in the wings. She tried damage control. I watched her fire off emails late into the night, hands trembling as she typed. The kitchen lights stayed on until 2 in the morning. I sat in the garage with my list, sipping tea and marking little check boxes. We were at step 7 now. Public perception collapse. Ahead of schedule. The next morning, she called her manager. He didn't answer. The next day, his assistant replied with one sentence. Jeremy has chosen to step away from influencer representation effective immediately. That one stunned her. Because Jeremy was her shield. Her fixer. The guy who once threatened to sue a follower who said she looked over-filtered. He'd even flirted with her in that fake-safe way certain men do when they smell potential percentages. She thought he'd never leave. Then Zayn ghosted. No calls. No texts. His account went private. His stories disappeared. A mutual friend tagged him in a blurry photo from a silent disco in Palm Springs, alone. She messaged him twice. I know, because I saw the notifications. She forgot her iPad was still logged in. She'd changed the lock screen photo from us to a crystal. But the thread was still named Zane's son with face fired. Her last message? Just one line. Please just tell me what's going on. No reply. That's when the anxiety set in. I heard her on the phone with someone, maybe her sister, whispering words like misunderstood and massive overreaction, and it's not like I cheated. We were emotionally disengaged for months. Ironic, really. She'd spent so long framing me as this stoic, checked-out old man who didn't understand her journey. Now that I actually checked out, the world started following. She tried one last story, a selfie with a cup of tea, captioned, "Losing people who don't respect your healing is not a loss. It's a detox. Teacup without handle dizzy." But the comments were closed. She always said silence was strength. Turns out, silence was my strategy. And now it was all she had left. The guest list was simple. 6 people, all older than 60, all real, all quiet. The kind of friends who never needed to post their plates to prove the meal happened. Engineers, an old Navy buddy, a retired architect named Lynn who once drank me under the table in Bangkok and still denies it. We met at Marco's, the restaurant Reagan once called too beige for her brand. The place hadn't changed in 20 years. Same menu. Same white tablecloths. No ring lights. No fusion foam. Just steak, wine, and company that didn't need subtitles or hashtags. I didn't call it a celebration. That would have sounded smug. I called it a farewell. Because that's what it was. Farewell to the version of me that flinched at being background. Farewell to a life where I was treated like an antique desk, useful, sentimental, but ultimately too heavy for the new aesthetic. We sat at the back, in the wine room. Tucked away. Candlelight. The kind of room you rent when you want peace, not presents. First course had just arrived, grilled artichokes with lemon butter, when the door opened. She walked in like she'd been summoned. Hair curled just right. That silk blouse she only wore when she wanted men to underestimate her. She was smiling like nothing had happened, as if all the scorched wreckage behind us was a scene from someone else's movie. Hi, she beamed, casually. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd say hello. I didn't realize you were all getting together. She lied smoothly, the way influencers do, like reality was a filter she could toggle off if it made her nose look funny. The table froze. Not in fear. In confusion. Because none of them had seen her in almost a year. Not since she stopped coming to cookouts. Not since she traded potluck casseroles for gut restorative cleanses and replaced their wives' birthdays with self-care weekends. She moved to hug Lynn. He nodded but didn't stand. I'll just sit for a second, she chirped. Catch up. I brought some of those vegan dark chocolate things everyone loved at New Year's. No one had loved them. Especially not at New Year's. I stood. Calm. Not angry. Just resolved. Reagan, I said, folding my napkin. This is a private event. The air changed. Subtly. Like someone had dimmed a light no one saw get turned on. She blinked. The smile stayed too long. Oh, come on, Tom, she laughed lightly, brushing imaginary lint off her blouse. It's just me. You can't seriously be. I didn't repeat myself. I simply stepped to the door. Held it open. She looked at me, really looked. Maybe for the first time in months, and saw it. I wasn't humiliated. I wasn't bitter. I was finished. This is a private event, I said again, softer now, but sharper. Please don't make me explain it again. The wine room stayed silent. No one moved. No one vouched. Her jaw tensed. She clutched the cellophane bag of chocolates tighter, like it might somehow rewind time. Then she turned. Not fast. Not with flair. Just enough delay to make it look like her choice. I closed the door behind her. Slowly. Deliberately. Then returned to my seat and passed the butter to Lynn. The conversation picked up where it left off, like she'd never been there. Because in that room, at that table, among those people, she hadn't. And she never would be again. It hit the internet at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not the front page of the Times, no, something meaner. Sharper. A mid-sized media blog with teeth and just enough credibility to make people pause their morning scroll. Social current. Influencer culture. Unfiltered. The headline read, Influencer couple breakdown. What really happened behind the hashtags? Her name was in the subheading. So was mine. The piece was brutal in that specific way modern journalism excels at, not loud, not slanderous, just surgical. It began with an overview of her rise, the yoga videos, the wellness partnerships, the husband appreciation posts where I'd appear blurry in the background holding a salad or fixing a light bulb. There was even a screenshot of that viral reel she filmed at our anniversary dinner 3 years ago, the one she captioned, "Grateful to build this life with my best friend." Then came the quotes. Anonymous sources. Close to the couple. Her former assistant. One of her brand reps. And finally, him Zayn. Not anonymous. Not even careful. He gave a statement through a PR rep, claiming creative misalignment and that he regretted the unprofessional blurring of boundaries. Which is media code for yes, we slept together, but I'm not going down for this. Then came the screenshots. Not the DMs. Those were old news by now. These were emails. In one, she told a brand's marketing team, "My husband and I are in alignment about the narrative. He's supportive and aware of the tone we're using for the campaign." Attached was a photo of the two of us at the beach, taken by me, posted by her, captioned, "Joy looks like this." The article made it clear. I hadn't been aware. Not of the tone, not of the narrative, and certainly not of the campaign. And then there was my quote. Just one line. Buried near the end of the piece, after 3,000 words of betrayal, optics, monetized affection, and monetized adultery, was this. I respected her privacy more than she respected our marriage. Tamar. No flourish. No burn. Just fact. Delivered like a wrench left on the hood of a car, silent, heavy, perfectly placed. She didn't post that day. For the first time in 4 years, no photo, no story, no vague quote about healing or rebirth or choosing softness. The silence screamed louder than any caption could. But the comments didn't wait. Her last post, 3 days old, a recycled selfie with a teacup, was flooded. So you just lied the whole time? Imagine monetizing your own husband like a prop. You don't deserve silence. You deserve consequences. He was in the background of your feed because that's how you treated him. A former fan posted a video dissecting the expose line by line, ending with, "There's nothing empowering about deception. And there's nothing spiritual about being manipulative." It hit 80,000 views in 12 hours. Brands pulled their remaining posts. A healing retreat in Sedona wiped her off their speakers page. A wellness candle line she claimed to co-design changed the product name from Reclaiming Light to Rebranding Fire and scrubbed the launch photos. She was hemorrhaging relevance. She called her manager. Voicemail. She texted Zayn. Deliver failed. She emailed the journalist. No reply. And then, finally, she messaged me. Just one line. I never thought you'd go public. I didn't answer. Because I hadn't. Not really. That quote? That line? That wasn't me going public. That was me acknowledging the fire she'd already lit and choosing to let it burn without throwing a single match of my own. That was the moment she realized the story was no longer hers to control. Because the fans didn't just turn. They saw. And when they looked closely, they didn't see a goddess reclaiming power. They saw a woman who mistook performance for love. And a man who vanished from the frame, just long enough to let the whole scene fall apart without him. The house was too quiet. Not the cozy kind. The kind that wraps around you when a storm's past and peace settles in. No, this was emptied quiet. The kind that rattles. The kind that echoes off corners you never noticed until they're stripped bare. She stepped through the doorway in soft soles, calling my name once. Just once. Out of habit, not hope. There were no shoes by the door. No tool bag on the floor. The bookshelf, half hers, half mine, was gone. So were the cookbooks she never used but liked to arrange for ambience. The French press was missing. The framed photo of us on Mount Rainier? Gone. In its place, a faint outline where dust had settled around the absence. Her key still worked. That part must have confused her, because somewhere in her head, she probably thought there was a final conversation waiting. A negotiation. A last plea she could dress up in forgiveness and organic tea. But there was no one to negotiate with. Only the fridge. And one note. Taped dead center. White paper. Block letters. No flourish. No exo. No name. Just one sentence. If it had been about love, you wouldn't have needed commandments. She didn't cry at first. She stood there, lips slightly open, reading it 3 times, slowly, like maybe the meaning would change if she stared long enough. But it didn't. The kitchen clock ticked behind her like it had a grudge. She looked around, suddenly scanning for signs of life. My shoes. My charger. My scent in the hallway. Nothing. Even the stupid plastic coaster with the half-faded palm tree was gone. She dropped her phone. No one to call. Her inbox had become a desert. No brands. No likes. No lifeline. The last message on her screen was from her sister, and it just said, "You okay?" She wasn't. Her legs buckled, knees to tile. The kind of fall no one sees coming until they hear the sound after. The choking sound, where breath and pride collide in the throat. Her shoulders shook. Not cute influencer tears. Not staged sobs through ringlet eyes. Real collapse. Because for all her talk of alignment, of empowerment, of setting intentions, she'd never once set the intention to keep me. Just to use me. Until I stopped being useful. Until I got in the way of her narrative. She thought I'd storm out. That I'd shout or slam doors or leave a legacy of noise. But I didn't. I left with precision. One folder at a time. One asset at a time. One decision at a time. And now, she wasn't just alone. She was small. Not in stature. In presence. In relevance. The woman who'd curated her life into digestible aesthetics now had nothing left to filter. No man to steady the frame. No followers to validate her sorrow. No plan B to pivot into. Just a kitchen. A note. And a silence that would outlive every hashtag she ever used. She never called again. Because even she understood. That sentence wasn't closure. It was a verdict. And it was final.